On Tuesday, the residents of Flint, Michigan were rattled by explosions that resulted from a secretive Jade Helm 15 Urban Army exercise.
Big, huge explosion. I mean, it was loud.
Explosions you'd expect in a war zone echoed through Flint, and people's homes shook and those inside were caught off guard. It all went down at the shuttered Lowell Junior High on the east side. And we've learned the blasts are just an Army exercise.
When the city representative was asked why the locals weren't warned in advance, his response was as typical as it is ominous.
Well, obviously I can't speak for the Army on that, but we try to give people a heads up when we can. We can't go into too much detail. We don't want people just coming to these things and sightseeing. So we have to be careful with it, and we obviously have to respect the Army's wishes.
Meanwhile, the Michigan Air National Guard published a warning just hours before they began night-flying helicopter drills from the Selfridge Air National Guard base into the surrounding area of Mount Clemens, Michigan. Jade Helm 15 appears to be underway. According to U.S. Army Special Operations Command, urban drills conducted by all 4 branches of the military are to begin in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, Mississippi, Florida, and Louisiana from July 15th through September 15th, 2015. The state of Colorado and 2 Texas counties requested to be dropped off the list of potential mock war zones. Clearly, the Flint, Michigan, June 2nd, 2015 exercises are way ahead of schedule, and no warning was given?
There's older people. I mean, they probably give them a heart attack.
Some are saying Jade Helm stands for Joint Assistant for Deployment and Execution, Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. This can only mean the returning veterans at the top of the Department of Homeland Security's domestic terror list. Back in 2009, the FBI launched Operation Vigilant Eagle, a nationwide operation that targeted militia, sovereign citizen extremist groups, with their sights set on veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. The Wall Street Journal reported on the memo trail that led months later to the desk of then DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano. Janet Napolitano warned of a surge of domestic right-wing terror groups that would recruit returning veterans into their fold in order to carry out attacks similar to the Oklahoma City bombing.
Returning veterans are targets of right-wing extremist groups that are trying to recruit those to commit violent acts within the country. We want to do all we can to prevent that.
That very same year, U.S. active duty Army military police troops from Fort Rucker, Alabama, violated posse comitatus by assisting in traffic control and securing a crime scene. These soldiers were reprimanded because the president and the governor didn't request their deployment. The Posse Comitatus Act prohibits the use of federal military personnel to execute the laws. Regardless, the feds interpret the language as it may apply to troops used in an advisory, support, disaster response, or other homeland defense role, as opposed to domestic law enforcement.
It was earth-shattering.
It was quite an explosion.
They were very loud and shook my house.
The explosions came the same day the city said the U.S. Army would be conducting training in the area.
Here we are, 6 years later, and a summer of rage is heating up. The Obama administration's rhetoric and George Soros's dollars have done all they can to divide the nation. United we stand, divided we fall. Apparently, Northcom and Southcom see that as an order and not as a long-standing American value. John Bound, Infowars.com.
Well, folks, that is another excellent and extremely informative report by our own John Bound. I'm Alex Jones. We're live on this Friday worldwide broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. And when we return, we're going to break down the huge developments on the TPP front. It's in trouble. The EU is in trouble. A lot of good news as the global fascist empire takes more serious blows from the worldwide rebellion against tyranny. I'm Alex Jones. You have found the tip of the spear for the fight for human liberty. Infowars.com. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. On this Friday, already the 5th day of whatever month it is in this insane asylum that we live in. Because it doesn't even matter what month or what year it is here inside the planetary world government, where the tyranny and the oppression and the ignorance just intensifies by the moment. It's television that's killing society. The world is absolutely filled with just non-productive, mindless chatter and behavior and people frittering away their lives, pretending that they're school teachers, pretending they're parents, pretending they're senators, pretending they're police officers, pretending they're artists, pretending they're intellectuals, pretending they're informed, pretending they've got their head screwed on straight, while meanwhile, organized anti-human systems are being developed and deployed against humanity. There is a lot of positive news, though, at the same time that we're going to be breaking down today on this worldwide broadcast. We have Lord Monckton joining us for 30 minutes at the start of the hour, one of the main fighters of the EU and the founder of UKIP, fastest growing party in England, UK-wide, and also in much of Europe. And he's an expert on EU tyranny and what's happening currently with the European Union, and that's tied into the rest of the trilateral global government program, the Asia Union and the American Union. EU weighs unprecedented reform as Britain threatens to leave. That's the Associated Press today. Germany's Merkel open to EU treaty changes for UK. BBC. We're going to be drilling down into what this means, but here's what's happened. The UK was brought in decades ago without a vote through stealth political actions into the unelected draconian European Union that at the time wasn't even announcing itself as a European Union and was actually a, quote, trade deal that was negotiated in secret and that England was then a signatory to. And we'll go over the years, when it happened, how it was implemented with Lord Monckton, who was there in the Thatcher government as her chief advisor, stopping it. And then as soon as she left office, they were able to sneak it through. So he was there when history was happening. Now, you may be saying this sounds like deja vu, because that's what the TPP is for the United States. And that's what NAFTA and GATT and all these things are these so-called trade agreements that are really global government agreements bringing us under private corporate globalist boards. And so this is really good news, because even if they ram the TPP through, which is in big trouble right now, it shows how decades later, as the public is informed of how they've lost their sovereignty and how roughly 83% of British and UK laws from Scotland to Ireland are made by the European Union itself. And then you notice just a few years ago, the EU actually officially just took Ireland over when it became a member. And then notice what happened to their economy. Suddenly they were signed on to all this debt that wasn't theirs. They conquer you through economic conquest. So this is such a huge time to be alive, because Bilderberg is a microcosm of this. The people that run Bilderberg, since the 1940s, they officially called it Bilderberg in 1954, when they met in Oosterbeek, Holland at the Bilderberg Hotel. They are the royalty. They are the robber barons of Europe and the United States. They are what you could call Hydra or Spectre. They are the bad guys. And their agenda can only operate in secret. If there's ever a debate about them, if there's ever a discussion about private corporate individuals and combines controlling government and controlling the issuance of currency and credit and controlling interest rates and controlling trade and borders and military and sovereignty and immigration, it's game over, because even the stupidest 75 IQ person out there who might be able to tie their shoelaces, who might be able to find their butt at high noon with both hands, they can understand that the decisions are being made by people who aren't from this country or aren't from their country and who do not have their best interest at heart. That is the simple fact in all of this. And so when you see the trilateral plan of an Asian Union, American Union, EU Union, all those unions then merging together through trade deals, when they were set up as trade deals, once you have a debate about that, the whole thing starts falling apart. The whole thing becomes crystal clear as a dictatorial, centralized despotism, no matter what name or whatever word you give it. And so you can see June 5th, 2015, as a very dark time for the world, where a lot of evil is coming out of the closet, emerging out of the waves, and attacking like the Hydra, like the Leviathan. But at the same time, it's an incredibly positive time because the world is awakening and saying no. And the Tory party had to act like UKIP or they would have lost the election. UKIP gained a lot of seats. It's like a Ron Paul style party. They're listeners of this show. They're guests of this show. They understand what's going on. Their fight is our fight. Our fight is their fight. We're all in the same boat. Sovereign nations being taken over by the globalists. We're all allied against this. And the Tories, as we said last year before the election and this year, began to act like UKIP and said, okay, we'll control the borders. Okay, we'll cut the taxes. Okay, we will get us out of the EU or at least allow you to have a vote. The British and the rest of the people in the UK never had a chance to even vote on whether they want to be part of the EU. We don't get a chance to have a vote here, do we? We don't get to even see the TPP. The Congress just votes. The House is about to vote. The Senate voted to just give the president unlimited power to sign on to whatever he wants. I mean, that is so sensational, off the chart, over the top, ridiculous. Totally ridiculous that would be happening. 2 members of Boehner's leadership team openly refuse to admit if they've read Obama Trade. That's the TPP. So this is all a bunch of criminals in suits trying to act like what they're doing is normal and kosher and acceptable and not a problem. They're hiding it in plain view. We're blowing the whistle. And just as they said Bilderberg didn't exist 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 40, 30, 20, in the last 10 years, they've been forced to admit it exists. They've been forced to admit much of their agenda. And guess what? It's a global government, carbon tax, open border, technological technocracy that ends human liberty, ends freedom, ends sovereignty, and forces you to eat Monsanto GMO, basically. And taxes the internet and takes over free speech. I mean, it's sick. We're exposing the entire globalist hierarchy. I just spent, if you just tuned in, 12 minutes trying to break down something that's really simple. A private, global, fascist, eugenics-based world government that started the Nazi Party, started the Communist Party, is so evil, they've just committed purely to the most wicked darkness you can imagine. They're purists. These bloodthirsty purists, based out of the British Empire, allied with the United States and the robber barons, created a system of culture control about 160 years ago and deployed the plan and have pretty much taken the planet over. And they discovered DNA, and they invented computers and biometrics. Galton in the 1860s said, we're going to create machines to track everyone. We're going to discover how humans operate. We're going to master it. We're going to bring in a planetary government. And we're going to remove all of the dumb people from the earth and create a utopia. And the dominant empire of the world adopted that. the British Empire, the greatest empire this world's ever seen, with all its administrative manipulations and military power. And now that philosophy, that system, that logic has permeated into a private global banking cartel, because the British don't really run it today, they're just part of it, and has merged with the military-industrial complex and the technological elite that Eisenhower spoke of, and they're on a power trip. They're racing to get life extension. They are allowing all their new drugs and surgeries to be tested on the general public to perfect them for themselves. That is the practice of medicine, is it not? It's why it's called practice. And they are effectively anesthetizing and dumbing down the public to come in for the big win. Ragtag forces are aware of this around the world. The chemicals in the food and water, the biological weapon engineering in the food. We can see the diseases skyrocketing. We can see the IQs plunging. We can read the globalist own battle plans and see they're carrying it out. And we're just here desperately trying to warn people. All being laughed at by the controlled right and controlled left. But as Christ said, forgive them, they don't know not what they do. The mid-level minions. The good news is, because of fighters like Nigel Farage and Lord Monckton 30 years ago that founded UKIP, they've put so much pressure on the UK that they are threatening to leave the EU if national sovereignty is not at least partially returned to the UK. That's a big first step. That's in the BBC and the Associated Press today. Germany's Merkel opened to EU treaty change for UK. EU weighs unprecedented reform as Britain threatens to leave. AP. And that ties into this headline. TPP begins to unravel as Obama launches final push for votes. Please just tell us what is in TPP. I'm going to read over some of this article. So humanity's putting up a fight. I mean, just 10 years ago, you'd tell people that there were, G7s and G20s, and you'd tell people that there were global elites meeting in secret, and the public had been taught there were no robber barons, there were no powerful men and women who wanted more power. I mean, that's like saying there is no sun that comes up in the morning. The public had been taught that government is pure goodness, and so are corporations, and nothing bad goes on. There's no secret groups, so just stick your head in the sand and go to sleep and watch your favorite TV show. We've now progressed to the point where 20 years ago, maybe 1 out of 50 people knew the Federal Reserve was private and European-owned. I mean, I remember hearing conservative talk show hosts 20 years ago say the Council on Foreign Relations didn't exist. They would get on air and say, that kook, Alex Jones, says a thing called the CFR runs everything. I didn't say it ran everything. Set up by British intelligence publicly in 1922 at Pratt House in New York City, with the express goal of establishing British Empire rule over the continental United States through infiltration of government and working with U.S. robber barons. Did a pretty good job. But see, now people know the Council on Foreign Relations exists, the U.S. branch of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. So once we identify there's this shadow monster in the room that's doing the mischief, that it's the 100-pound gremlin, it's goodbye gremlin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this live, worldwide, original, teleprompter-free radio / television transmission. I am your host, Alex Jones. Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com are our two flagship websites. We also have PrisonPlanet.tv as we fight the construction of the global prison planet. Let me just do this. I do this sometimes at the start of the show. I'm going to reset because I get so upset looking at the news headlines before the show. I tend to get mad. And I'm trying to psychologically get a handle on this. Again, there's a lot of good news. There's also a lot of bad news. We told you the day they indicted Dennis Hastert that it would be about basically raping his wrestlers. And, of course, now families have come out, and we know the names of the people and the payoffs. And exclusive, Dennis Hassard's sex abuse victim is named by family. I wonder what Lindsey Graham's going to do when his friend gets in trouble. Old Lindsey. I just think of Hassard. I just think of Lindsey. I don't know why. But you wonder why these guys are so sold out, why they go against 90%, 85% polls on things like TPP. It's because the Republican and Democratic parties go out and recruit people that are pedophiles, because they know once they destroy them or need to destroy them, no one's going to listen to them saying other people are corrupt around them because of the scarlet letter P for child rapist or pedophile. So they go and they recruit them out of networks of pedophiles, and that's why the government's so scum-filled and why so many Homeland Security regional directors constantly get caught just every few weeks with little kids. There's one level even worse than them, though. There's the snuff films. In fact, the bassist of the Scorpions came out on TMZ a week ago, and Mark Dice had a report on it. We ought to play it. I forgot to tell you guys that, where he admitted in Germany, that's what movies like Hostel, I've told you, are based on real stuff, where people are killed at these elite parties. That happened in New York with Rolling Stone one time, little dead black kid at the party, but you can hardly find that even in the news annals with a LexisNexis search. So there's a whole nother level beyond just raping kids. It's killing them. And to the Scorpions, bassist credit, he said it was horrible and made him sick and traumatized him. He's very serious when he's talking to the reporter. So this is who we have running things. People that like to take 5-year-olds and torture the living daylights out of them and scare the hell out of them before they kill them. And I'm not going to go into what they do to kids, folks, but it's everything you read about in the old wives' tales. Oh, people claim Satanists would get babies and cut them and drink their blood. No, that's what they do. Former Scorpions bass player admits to attending snuff parties. There's the headline. Oh, man. I did a whole report on this earlier this week, and Transable, where people cut their arms and legs off. And I talked about chemicals in the food and water increasing breast and prostate cancer and accelerating aging and causing sexual confusion. And Salon wrote an article making fun of it. It's not funny. And implying I'm basically making it up. No, I'm not making any of it up. I'm not making it up that the IQ points in the United States just dropped another 14 points. In fact, none of this matters, though, because no one's going to go after Mark Rubio, the senator, for saying there's no NSA spying, lying bigger than Clapper. No, they're going to go after him for something that doesn't matter. His wife's 17 traffic infractions. They always go after some little crooked toenail because that doesn't affect the elites and all their big corrupt operations. That's the big national news story today out of the New York Times is Mark Rubio, his wife cited 17 times for traffic infractions. Knock on wood, I haven't gotten a traffic infraction in it's got to be 6-7 years. But then all of a sudden I'll get 3 in a row. But why are we even talking about that? Well, I raised the point to illustrate how it's a distraction. Just like when I talk about Bruce Jenner. We're being assaulted by Tavistock Institute technology, weaponized media to scramble our brains. And you know what? It's working. Our brains are even getting smaller. Paul Watson wrote an article, and he has links to the statistics and facts in it, called The Rise of the Idiots. Westerners are dumber than ever before, and their brains are physically smaller. Genitalia are smaller. Sperm counts are down almost 90%. Oh, but there's nothing wrong. Nothing bad's happening because diabetes is up several thousand%. Type 2. Type 1's well, cancer's way up the chart. Don't be a fearmonger. They're only spying on us without warrants and opening the borders outside of law and having military drills everywhere and TSA grabbing our genitals. Everything's fine. Don't worry about Jade Helm, even though every state in the union is having reports of troops running checkpoints and helicopters blowing stuff up in the middle of the night, terrorizing people as they get us ready for a military takeover. Oh, everything's fine, though. Go back to sleep. You're like walking in and seeing your 5-year-old dying of cancer and going, don't be upset. Don't be upset. There's nothing wrong with you. America is on its deathbed. We're on our deathbed. We've killed 56 million babies and just say, oh, they're not babies. And now old people aren't old people. Kill them. And now veterans aren't veterans. Just death list them. I've got an article right here out of the New American by Alex Newman that details with links to all of the announcements where they're calling elderly in Europe and the UK second-class citizens and denying them health care, saying, well, we're socialist, we save money doing that. I thought it was about being nice and taking care of everyone. No, it's about killing you. I mean, just look at these headlines, okay? When is it a crime to withdraw money from your bank? That's right. That's a serious headline in the New York Times. Obama under pressure to release secrets of 9/11 report. London Telegraph. Massive data breach could affect every federal agency. Chinese breach of 4 million federal workers' databases in a cyber war right as they try to pass the Homeland Security cyber takeover and the end of the internet freedom. Who knows if the Chinese even did it? And I'm not saying they're not probing, there isn't wars going back and forth. The point is, look at the timing of all this. Look at these headlines. Obama and his GOP allies launch big effort to win trade fight in the House. Oh, the Washington Post calls it a trade fight. How did the EU start? Oh, is the Treaty of Rome a steel deal in 1957? But it wasn't a steel deal. It was the entire union. It's 600 pages long. I've scanned the whole document. It's incredible. And you got Pelosi and Boehner and all these crooks. Boehner's completely out of his mind, is always crying. Complete lunatic. God knows what they've got on him. And they're just up there going, there's a secret treaty that takes over everything, and you can't see it. And the whore media, the prostitute media, won't even tell you that it's not a trade deal, that it's a huge power grab, when subsections have been leaked of it that are so draconian. And of course it came out, Obama was on NPR, this is on Drudge Today, and said, yeah, there's carbon taxes. We're going to save the earth from global warming in the TPP. That's why we got to do it. Oh, of course that's in there. Senators have already leaked what's in it. Gun control, open borders, world government. And the worst part is it's a blank check written open-ended. There it is. Obama admits climate change will be in Obama trade. It's just all in there because it has to line up with the European Union rules, and it has to line up with all the NAU stuff. I've got the EU documents. I've got the NAU documents. It'll be the same thing, folks. That's how I told you what was in it before it got released, because it's a long-term plan. I know the whole stinking thing up one side and down the other. People are like, why are you so upset? I mean, I don't know if Japan would have, if our government would have stood down to Japan in World War II and just invited Imperial Japan in to take over, I'd be upset. Or if we would have stood down in World War I guess, and invited the Germans in to take over or something, I'd be upset. Or if we'd have stepped down and said, Stalin's going to take over America, I'd be saying it was wrong. But because it's a bunch of corporations and the media won't tell you about it, I mean, this is incredible that they would be doing this. And again, there is something wrong with me. Because I'm upset that all over the place they're announcing, yeah, we're not going to give old people medical care. Yeah, you know what? Maybe we should kill babies up to age 5. Yeah, you know what? We're going to lower the blood alcohol level down to half a beer and then put you in jail for it. It's not about keeping you safe on the road. It's about getting everybody in the prison system. This country and this world has learned how to steal and how to scam and how to bamboozle, not how to build anything anymore. And we're now reaching the tipping point into total corruption when everything unravels and falls apart and hell on earth gets released. And the giant hordes of moralists, mindless, dumb, pack-minded, tribal-minded people will be organized into giant criminal hordes by the government to rob and steal everything. And the youth will be turned loose into arrogant, power-tripping, politically correct, modern red brigades to just run around robbing and clubbing and stealing and raping and just pleasuring themselves on the carcass of humanity. Read the Bible. Your women will be put above you when you're cursed. Your children will be put above you. You will be enslaved. You will lose all your prosperity. You will be driven into the dirt. And then everything will collapse, and the children will just writhe around in dirt piles, throwing fits, starving to death, cursing those that fed them. Oh, I haven't even scratched the surface of the news. Jade Helm 15 has already begun. Training likely linked to Jade Helm begins in other states. Yeah, it's been going on intensely. Powerful report on Infowars.com. Land of the free. Police and prosecutors fight aggressively to retain barbaric right of civil asset forfeiture. This isn't like how they sold it in the 80s, that they bust some kingpin in Miami who's got a $50 million house and $100 million in the bank, and it's all cocaine money, and then that gets seized. No, it's you pull an old lady over and she's got $2,000 and you just take it. Or on Amtrak, you got $5,000, they just take it. And now they're taking jewelry off your fingers. It's just highwaymen. It's train robbers. And this is what the feds got the states to do. Then when the states passed laws doing it, the feds came in as the saviors and said, no, we're going to lobby to have state laws changed and sue people until asset forfeiture is only a federal program. And then the feds give 80+% of the money back to the state to federalize them. And that's all that is really about. I mean, do I care if some scumbag, pimp, drug dealer gets his Corvette taken away? Not really on the surface, but then that corrupts the police and incentivizes them to keep the drug war going when the government and the big corporations ship the drugs in as a destabilization effort. The informant says Yemen helped direct al-Qaeda. We're going to break that now. It's all coming up today. We have Lord Monckton joining us on the big victory that the EU is now in deep trouble. Because people are thinking, why are we under the EU? We never got to vote. That was supposed to just be a trade deal. See, it's the same thing with TPP. They never want to discuss how it's foreign, how it's shadow, how it's secret, how the bill's secret, how the agreements are secret, because they don't want to have a discussion. We force the discussion. We've already done it. From this doesn't exist to, oh, it's good for you. Don't worry about it. It's secret. We've already come that far. And let me tell you, once you identify that there's criminals running things, it's game over. They're going to try tyranny. They're going to try takeovers. Hey, listen, they would have already carried out false flags to blame it on the Tea Party. But they're scared. We've got people in every federal agency, every police department, every shop, every store. There are patriots that know the paradigm with video cameras everywhere. And not even an internet kill switch is going to save you when you pull off some big new 9/11 or nuclear 9/11 and we catch you doing it. Hell, even if you didn't do it, the people are going to blame you. You know that, right? Because you did it so much before. It's like if you're a convicted child molester, 3-time loser, and you've gotten out after 30 years in prison and a kid gets raped on the street, you're going to get blamed, perp, even if you didn't do it this time. You understand? So you go ahead and pull off those false flags, scum. People ask why I get so vicious and nasty and mean. And I've psychoanalyzed it. I was traumatized as a young man growing up in Dallas, Texas. And you could say it made me who I am, or you could say it made me a nasty person or whatever. I was in a lot of rough situations. But the point is that at least I'm not these jellyfish that don't recognize tyranny when they see it. I've seen it, and I know to stand up against it. And I know these nasty people have to be met with nastiness right back. Their intimidation, their arrogance, their con artist game is over. Who's going to stand up for the kids they're grabbing for snuff films? Who's going to stand up against the Hollywood folks at their death parties? Remember Chuck Norris's son in here talking about Hollywood and all the bad stuff? He said things even worse. And he shook. I want to be clear. The United States has already been taken over. We're already in the NAU, already merged with the EU and Asian Union. And that's in all the different globalist BAMF Canada and other documents that have come out. I talk about BAMF all the time because it was thousands of pages, and I actually read hundreds of them. And it was all, we've got to do this by stealth. We'll use terrorism and the flu to take over and merge everything, and then we'll get the politicians to join our ranks. And it was like Fortune 500, over 100 companies there voting, and then the leaders of the U.S., Canada, and Mexico would then vote off their orders at the secret meeting. That's how this works, and it just broke at Infowars.com, red linked. Trans-Pacific Partnership emails show CEO joked about making royalty payments to U.S. officials. These are our rules, bragged chemical company boss, and the emails are now through FOIA request. You see, they've made the TPP secret, but then you can do FOIAs to the United States trade representatives and others and then get the sub-documents. That's why they're now having hearings in Congress. I saw them yesterday about just basically getting rid of FOIA, saying there's so many, we just can't respond anymore. Years ago, I sent off for my FBI file, and they said, we're too busy. They violated federal law. I have a lawyer doing it right now. My lawyer said, you know, they may come after you for this. And he goes, yeah, now they come after people that do their FOIA. Well, good, come after me. Like you did all those little kids, you rape and blow their heads off. I mean, you people are sick freaks. You're a bunch of crooks. I don't care what you do anymore. I'm not ever going to back down from you scum. I mean, you're a bunch of scum. I'll cover this more in the next hour, Lord Moncton. I'm going to settle down. In fact, speaking of snuff films, here's the clip from TMZ. We'll put the article on screen, too, about the snuff stuff. And that's what all this crush porn and all of it is. It's all just hating life, and it's just sick. A former Scorpions bass player admits to attending snuff parties. By the way, I just love the Scorpions. He said he hated it, but still he should have done more and spoke out then. It makes me sick now when I hear him come on the radio. Briefly, we fund this operation with T-shirts, books, films, high-quality water filters, htfirearms.com, super high-quality assault rifles made in America, the best out there for the price, htfirearms.com, InfoWarsStore.com. We are running out of X2 faster than I thought. Weldon and Anthony came in and said the numbers show it'll be sold out by Sunday night at this rate. And we think it'll only be a few weeks till we get a small supply back in that's being manufactured right now, but then the crystals are basically out. And so it could be a month, 6 months, a year, maybe never. So maybe quicker. I don't know. It's up in the air. InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139. Read up on iodine. It's serious business. This is the best, cleanest out there. And it's just done wonders for myself and others, but it's powerful. So be sure and check what the adverse reactions can be, especially if you're already unbalanced. So read about all that. Talk to your physician or healthcare provider before using InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139. We've got the DNA Force. We've got the Super Male, Super Female Vitality. All of it is knock your socks off hardcore. Let's go out to break here with a clip from Mark Dice breaking this down. In fact, in the next segment, I'm going to air Mark Dice's whole report because it really brings a lot of context to it. He has a way of just saying stuff right down to the point, not kind of pontificating like I do, but here's a clip.
I went to one time. I've seen really bad. No, actually, I think they actually kill people there and stuff. They pay up to 100,000 people to see people get executed. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, well, the Romans did that, and the Babylonians did that, and the ancient Chinese did that, and everybody else, the Mesoamericans did it. The Druids did it. I mean, this is sick. I guess I'm a snuffophobe. I'm not cool enough to think young men and women that grab off the street, usually young trendies thinking they're moving to Berlin or L.A. to make it big. I guess I'm not cool because I'm not into pedophilia. I'm not into torturing people to death. I am into hunting down people that are involved in stuff like this at a very fundamental level. But I wouldn't even take pleasure in seeing these people executed any more than I take pleasure on shooting a weasel getting in the hen house. But these are predators, and this is who rules our planet. And they're setting up a world government so they can carry out their operations publicly and be above the law. And so they can be above God's law and achieve life extension. That's their holy grail. But I guess supposedly if you had the holy grail, you live forever. As science fiction becomes reality. Let's go ahead and play Mark Dice's report.
I'll show you the video clip of him admitting it out of his own mouth in just a second. The former bassist from the Scorpions, Ralph Reicherman, has admitted that he once attended a snuff party where someone or multiple people were murdered for the entertainment of the guests who paid up to $100,000 to attend. Reicherman, originally from Germany, bumped into a paparazzi from TMZ who asked him about Berlin's popular fetish parties, and this was his stunning response.
I went to one time. I've seen really bad.
Was it like a donkey show or?
No, actually, I think they actually kill people there and stuff. They pay up to 100,000 people to see people get executed. I'm not kidding.
Says he's not kidding. You can see the look on his face. Looks pretty freaked out, which brings to mind the allegations made by former Senator John DeCamp in his book, The Franklin Cover-Up, about supposed snuff films and child abuse that is alleged to have occurred inside the Bohemian Grove by Illuminati members and Aleister Crowley fans and black satanic sex magic practitioners back in the 1980s, around the same time when the Scorpions were in their heyday. They were very popular. Songs like Wind of Change, Rock You Like a Hurricane, and Still Loving You. But one of their album covers, Virgin Killer, features child pornography, which was sanctioned and approved by RCA Records. So it shouldn't be that surprising that such sick individuals who would put such things on their album cover would be rubbing elbows with such sick, satanic people that they would be throwing parties where people would get murdered for the entertainment of the guests. Ralph Reicherman also hinted that there was even something worse that happened at the parties when he said this.
I went to another one where literally I saw the grossest. I wanted to throw up.
Was he talking about possible child abuse as outlined in the Franklin cover-up? Such allegations don't seem that far-fetched when you understand the sick, satanic black magic practicing scum within the Illuminati, and his stunning admission really should be investigated by the FBI. Absolutely horrific. But in today's society, with many people paying money to go and see the most brutal and realistic horror films like Saw and Hostel, it certainly isn't that far-fetched to believe that certain individuals want to go a step further and actually witness or participate in murders themselves as a form of their entertainment.
Yep. And Mark Dice is obviously a snuffophobe and I guess you could say a pedophobe, someone scared of children, a pedophile phobe. And I am too. We are bigoted and bad. The late, great Bilderberg sleuth, Jim Tucker, when Margaret Thatcher had just been out of office 1 year, was able to interview her briefly at a D.C. press dinner that she was a keynote speaker at. And she was actually there attending it with the vice president. And he wrote an article about it. The fact that he brought up Bilderberg to her and how she had helped keep the UK out of the European Union, and that she said that she was very, very proud of that, and that she was most proud of that, and that basically it was treasonous. Well, the UK was sucked into the EU by the so-called trade deal, just like the TPP, and details were kept secret. They weren't allowed to vote on it. Just as we're now seeing their prime minister, our president, was, quote, given the unconstitutional authority under either country's laws to sign on to it. And now we know, because of a statement President Obama made on NPR, that's on Infowars.com and DrudgeReport.com today, that indeed there is carbon taxes, there is, quote, global warming initiatives in the TPP agreement. There is draconian manipulation of our borders, quotas on refugees. It's the same thing that's in the EU or the NAU. It's the same group. And we're very honored to have Lord Christopher Monckton, who was on record a major newspaper editor, inventor, chief advisor to Margaret Thatcher, the founder of UKIP, the fastest growing party in the UK and in Europe. Of course, their big stars, Nigel Farage, been a guest many times here. He heads up science at publicpolicy.org. We normally have him on as the leading expert exposing Al Gore and the carbon tax fraud. And there's new documents out today that NASA was ordered to fix the decline in temperature, just as East Anglia got caught in ClimateGate doing. But we're not going to get into that today. I wanted to get Lord Monckton on, and I appreciate him taking the time out to do it on this Friday evening UK time, to discuss what it's like to have fought this, held it back as her advisor. He was the guy to found UKIP decades ago to try to get them then out of the EU, the dictatorial EU that makes 80+% of UK laws without a vote. And to now have the BBC News headline, Germany's Merkel open to EU treaty changes for UK to keep them in. AP, EU weighs unprecedented reform as Britain threatens to leave. The TPP, the EU, it's all heads of the same globalist multinational hydra. And sure, UKIP's forced the Tories to act like they're going to try to let the EU system be forced to a vote. But it does show major progress, in my view. And just look at the progress of founding UKIP. In fact, Lord Monckton, give us some of the history. In fact, I'm going to give you the floor right now. Until we go to break in about 8-9 minutes. I mean, when did you found UKIP? Break it all down for folks and where we are today, because this is so historical, and it's got to feel really good for you to see this happening.
Well, UKIP was founded, actually not by me, but it was founded 22 years ago.
But you were one of the founders of UKIP, from what I've read online.
It came quite late to the party, actually. It was founded by originally an academic called Alan Sked, who was concerned that we were no longer a democracy. Our democracy had been taken away by stealth, piece by piece. They had dismantled our democracy. Now it's getting on for 90% of all laws made for us are made not by people we elect, but they're made by people we don't elect. The commissars, as the Germans call them, the people who meet behind closed doors, there are 30 of them. Nobody knows really who they are.
Sure, but I want to give you the floor, but just to get it clear, you were there early on with Thatcher fighting it. from my research, and you were involved in the main launch of UKIP being successful, because from what I've read in newspapers, they say you and Nigel Farage are basically founders of it. I mean, I guess because you helped it become successful, they say that then.
I mean, certainly in Scotland, we've got it going. We've now got our first representation north of the border. I was leader of the party in Scotland when that happened. We are making waves right throughout Britain. We got an enormous percentage of the vote at the last general election, but didn't get more than one parliamentary seat, because when you first begin a breakthrough of this kind, you don't get many seats, and then you build on that. And next time we'll get still more, because what's going to happen is there's going to be a bogus negotiation where Cameron and the other European members will get together. They'll work out a few token concessions so that Cameron can then say to the people, well, I recommend that they've given us enough. What they won't have given us is our democracy back. And until they do, UKIP won't be satisfied. What we want to see is a right of the parliaments of member states to vote down legislation proposed by the EU unless and until the elected European Parliament, which at the moment doesn't even have the power to bring forward a bill, not much of a parliament that then, is given proper democratic power. If it's not given enough power, then we would rather just leave. So we've made huge advances in the European elections. We're now the largest party in Britain in the European Parliament. We've made very big advances also in the British elections, but we've now begun, rather surprisingly, to take votes almost as much from the Labour Party as from the Conservative Party. Because one of the things that Nigel has brilliantly done is to broaden the appeal of the party. So it's no longer just the intellectuals, the academics concerned about our democracy. It's ordinary working people who are now becoming concerned about our democracy.
Well, that's very exciting, but I mean, as somebody involved since the Thatcher administration, can you go back to the fight then? I mean, she was successful holding it back then they were able to ram it through by stealth, because I'm comparing it to how they're trying to ram through the TPP the very same way.
Absolutely. They could not get through what eventually became the Maastricht Treaty, which was the one where we finally gave our control of our laws away forever. They couldn't get that through while Margaret Thatcher was still in office. They had to get rid of her before they could do it. And it was the pro-European faction in the cabinet that plotted against her to bring her down, so that they could drag us in ever deeper into this mess of anti-democracy. And we fought that for as long as she was Prime Minister. They knew they couldn't get away with that. She was very willing to work with our European partners on matters of common advantage, but she was not willing to give away our democracy. And she stood very firm and very strong and very clear on this. And of course, it was very popular with the people. She was re-elected 3 times with huge majorities, precisely because she had taken a tough line, a pro-British line, and a pro-democracy line, because in her day, the two things went together. Now, Cameron is not of the same stamp. He's very different. He is saying, well, we want to stay in the European Union, and he will do whatever it takes to do it. It's not even clear that they will make sure that the referendum bill, which it has to be passed before a referendum can be held on this question, will pass the House of Lords, because... Sure,
but I mean, he is at least engaging in this lip service because of UKIP pressure, correct?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that had it not been for UKIP, he wouldn't even have made that promise before the last general election that this time he would give us a referendum.
So it shows the issue is now becoming more and more popular. People are more and more aware of it.
Now on the front pages. There's no longer can the establishment say this is something you can sweep under the carpet. No longer can they say this is just a few cranks. That's what they said of us, in the early years.
So isn't that a devastating victory for sovereignty worldwide?
I think this is enormous, because I think what's going to happen is that people worldwide will realize you can do this. You can fight City Hall on these democratic issues, and you can win. And I want to end very briefly on one little point that you raised earlier about Tom Carl of the NOAA and fiddling the temperature data to try to pretend that there has been global warming over the last 18 years, 6 months, when the satellites show zero global warming over the last 18 years, 6 months. How has he done this? He's done it by fiddling the figures. And he fiddled them in a really clever way, but we've seen through it. Now, I've got a paper already up on the internet at whatsupwiththat.com, W-A-T-T-S, upwiththat.com, which explains that since the oceans below the surface, which he's talking about, are warming at only 1/5 of the rate he says the surface is warming at, and because the air immediately above the surface he's talking about is not warming at all, the conclusion is that he is simply making it up. His paper is, in fact, a breach of the laws of thermodynamics, which is how heat gets moved around. If you make a sandwich like the barbecue you and I had when I came to visit you in Austin, Texas, and you put meat in the middle and bread either side, if the bread is colder than the meat will cool down. It will not stay hotter than the bread. And what he's trying to say is that the surface in the middle of this sandwich between the air above and the ocean below is hotter than both. It can't be. It's as simple as that.
Incredible. We've got one more segment, and I do want to segue into this because it's all interconnected. We now know TPP, that's secret, basically the Asian Union to merge with the EU and the American Union under the Trilateral Plan. We now know, Lord Monckton, as you know, that it does have that in it. Just outrageous.
Well, this is an enormous disgrace that Obama is insisting as the price of American cooperation in this and any other international agreement that the countries with whom he does business have to kowtow to this climate monster by shutting down their major industries. And already your coal industry is on its knees. Already your utilities are on their knees. Already your aluminium smelters are going overseas. Your steelworks are going overseas. And paradoxically, therefore, emitting more CO2 because they operate under more inefficient overseas regimes than if they'd stayed at home. But he doesn't care. These were the people who used to be the big donors for the Republican Party, and this has nothing to do with the climate, but everything to do with Obama trying to destroy the funding of his political opponents. It is as straightforward as that. It's very typical.
It's a mafia takeover. It's like Hitler, for 5 years before he rounded them up, wouldn't let Jews and others run their shops to first make them destitute before he actually grabbed them. You take people's power away before you kill them.
That's exactly what he's been trying to do, and that's the significance of Tom Carl's paper today. After the break, I'll tell you a very funny story about me and Tom Carl in front of Congress.
Sure, actually skip the break, Lord Monckton, to give you more time.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to carry on now? Or
yeah, go ahead. I just skipped it. Go ahead.
Okay, fine. Right, what we're going to do is, about 2009 this was, I've been invited by the Republicans to testify as their witness in front of Congress opposite Tom Carl, who, of course, was the Democrats' witness. Now, Tom Carl is the head of the National Climatic Data Center, which is a subdivision of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and it, among other things, keeps a global temperature record. Now, I was explaining to Congress, and I showed them a chart, which demonstrated that for the 8 previous years, there had actually been global cooling. Now, Representative Joe Barton of Texas, who was the Republican ranking member on the committee at that time, said to Tom Carl, he said, but you and other officials have been coming here for months telling us we've got global warming. Lord Monckton says there hasn't been any. In fact, it's been cooling for 8 years. Will you please explain why you never told us that? Or is Lord Monckton lying to us? So Tom Carl flannelled like mad and said, oh, well, he wouldn't have done the thing the same way as I had done it. So Joe Barton cut him off and said, you're both to go away and write letters to the committee explaining your facts. So all I did was to send a letter to the committee taking Tom Carl's own temperature data set, the NCDC temperature data set, and sure enough, for 8 years, it showed global cooling. He had tried to mislead Congress. He's now trying to mislead the world again, this time by pretending that there hasn't been this very long pause in global warming, during which for the last 18 years and 6 months, according to the satellite data that came out just 2 days ago, there has been no global warming at all, notwithstanding record increases in CO2 concentration. So we've got the CO2 concentration going through the roof. In fact, it's now higher than it's been in 810,000 years.
Absolutely, sir. But I mean, before you go any further, just as a political researcher, the Club of Rome, all these inside robber baron globalists that are the opposite of free market corporations are at war with the free market segment and, quite frankly, taking it over. We're in deep trouble. And so productivity's in deep trouble. They're in a consolidation period. We're being conquered, basically. But even if carbon dioxide was bad, even if it was warming us up, even if all these lies were true, we always have that debate on the science, which I know is important, and you've won that debate. They just keep stonewalling, and separately, how does paying gore and blood carbon trading in London or paying the Chicago Mercantile that Obama is invested in and that Soros is invested in and then N.M. Rothschild, how does paying these billionaires billions and billions and trillions in the aggregate, how does that save the earth when you move 1,000 coal plants from the U.S. to Mexico and China where they have no controls and they're totally dirty and ours are clean? How? So, I mean, it's all a fraud. It's all a scam. So
I think give you the figures on that because China overtook the United States just 10 years ago as the world's largest emitter, and in 10 years has become twice as large an emitter of CO2 as the United States. And what does Obama do? He goes to his fellow communists last December in China and says, you can go on emitting as much CO2 as you like. I'm going to shut down the U.S. economy so you don't have to compete with it for natural resources.
Unbelievable.
It's a big concern of the Chinese. And the Chinese have said, yeah, we're happy with that. Well, what's not to like? So what is happening here? You're quite right about these rich people who have clambered onto this climate bandwagon because this, Alex, is the fastest transfer of wealth and power
ever
from poor people worldwide to rich people worldwide in human history. That's what it's really all about.
And they package it as helping poor people.
Yeah. Because as you've said, they don't care about poor people. They care about them if they're voters. Otherwise, they don't care about them at all. And even then, not much. They want to get rich. They have realized that by coming up with this ridiculous, increasingly, visibly ridiculous climate mantra, they can get shovelfuls of cash. That's why Tom Carl comes out with these dopey papers and puts all those falsehoods in front of them.
Well, I mean, how many times can they get caught with fake data and fake data sets in the emails, you know, to hundreds of other groups faking everything? I mean, how many times can they get caught until they get in some type of trouble? I want you to answer that, Policer. And then in closing, what about Al Gore in a speech? We played the clip last week. In 2007, getting his Nobel Prize, or 2006, saying that the Antarctic ice cap will be completely gone by 2013, and now it's at record levels. I mean, he's got to get caught saying polar bears are all dying when their numbers are up fivefold.
That's right. The polar bears' numbers are up. It's the Arctic ice cap he was talking about, and that is still there, very much still there. You've got my piece now, I see, on the.
Was he talking about? He was talking about Arctic, yeah, the northern. I said the southern. Sorry.
And the Arctic ice is still there, even in the summer. And it wouldn't matter terribly much if it disappeared in the summer. It's only going to disappear for a few weeks. Again, the laws of thermodynamics dictate that for the rest of the time it's got to be there because of the way the sun hits at an angle. So all of these fictions are beginning to become more and more implausible. That's the significance of Tom Carl's ludicrous paper, because what he is having to do is to produce so absurd a false result that even a layman like me can look at it and find the most obvious way of showing it's an absurd result, which is if the air above the surface isn't warming, if the ocean below the surface is hardly warming, how can the surface itself be warming? The answer is it can't. It's an offense against the laws of thermodynamics, the laws of how heat moves around in a system. There is no way that his result can be correct. It is really as simple as that, and that's the point.
Are you saying 2 + 2 doesn't really equal 5 like Common Core says?
That's it. I'm saying 2 + 2 still equals 4. Like it or not, Alex, I'm old-fashioned about these things. And what they are saying is they are now, in desperation, coming out with lies that are so absurd that you can knock them down in 2 minutes. It doesn't even require detailed research to do it. And that's the point. They know that this Paris climate...
So what are they going to do next, and what's their next big power grab?
Next big thing is the climate conference in Paris. The Paris Climate Conference is the real big one. That's in December this year. It's the 23rd, I think it is, in the series of annual UN climate bedwetters conferences where tens of thousands of activists basically go there and a few dozen national negotiators go there. And they now have in place a plan which will create what they're no longer going to call a global government. The term government was used in the 2009 Copenhagen draft, which failed when China blew it out of the water. But now China's been nobbled by Obama because he's exempted them from having to make any cuts in emissions. Whatever Paris actually does will make no difference to the climate, even if CO2 had an influence to the degree that they say it does, which we now know it doesn't. But they're still going to set up their global government. They're calling it this time, rather coyly, a governing body, so that they can easily change it into a government later, exactly the same as the EU. It's the same model. They started by requiring that nations should report various data to them. They then gradually increased the obligations to report, so that you're having to spend vast amounts of money collecting perfectly useless data about how much CO2 you emit and how much you scavenge back by planting trees, and nonsensical stuff. And they make the nations do that. Then they make the nations comply with various targets, which the nations first of all voluntarily put forward, and then gradually they become compulsory. That's the stage they're reaching now in Paris. They have set up in the meantime something like 1,000 new supranational bureaucracies to be the sinews of this global government. They are already in place. They were put in place by the Cancun Treaty.
Well, Lord Monckton, we're going to have you back up in the near future to break all that down. Scienceandpublicpolicy.org. You're on the front line of fighting global tyranny, and we salute you for your great work with the UKIP and others on forcing an awakening to the fact that you're under EU dictatorship. Thank you so much. Great job. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, and God bless you. God bless America. We will keep the world free, whether the powers that be like it or not.
Hoorah to that. We'll be back. Tons of news straight ahead. Coming up, we have the lawyer who authored the U.S. Chemical and Biological Weapons Treaty. He also went to the quasi-classified Harvard PhD program that only has one PhD a year that Kissinger and others have gone through, so he was given the inside scoop on how stuff really operates. Francis A. Boyle's coming on because he's an expert on the anthrax attacks that happened, and he can get into the Pentagon mailing anthrax all over the U.S. and all over the world, weaponize anthrax, what's really behind that. Then we'll get his breakdown on the TPP, on all the news coming out and the documents coming out that the West is running the Syrian rebels, including the, quote, radicals that make up the vast majority, while saying that we should all give up our freedoms to be protected from the very radicals that they run. So that is coming up for 30 minutes in the next hour, just like Monckton joined us for a half hour. Then in that last half hour, I've got a special report Jakari Jackson did dealing with just the out-of-control corruption with big charities and how United Way, Red Cross, and others keep more than half the money. They give money to gun control, you name it. But because they're too big to fail, people still just keep giving them money. And it's the same thing that we see across the board. Meanwhile, they're talking about Senator Marco Rubio's wife and he both have together, since they've been married more than a decade, 17 traffic infractions. What is that, less than one a year? And I don't like Rubio for open borders, being anti-gun, being a globalist, being pro-Big Brother. Attack him on, but it just shows how, oh, look, 17 traffic infractions. Oh, my gosh. This is just amazing. Oh, my, that's really big news. And did you hear about Jenner? Yeah, he wears a wig now. Wow. I mean, why don't they call all the guys from Police Academy where they dress up like women and got beards? Why don't they give them Nobel Prizes or something? It's not that I'm even bashing the guy who thinks she's a woman. It's that it's the top story in the country for the last few weeks, and it just doesn't even matter. It's just stupid. Like stories about traffic tickets. While we're going under a global treaty, the TPP, that codifies every nightmare you can imagine into law. But before I go any further, I want to get into this whole soccer situation. I've talked some about it, but now it's really clear. Just a week ago, it was a conspiracy theory to say that the U.S. was doing this, the people that run the U.S. were doing this, to claw away the World Cup from Russia. Now they say that that's in question whether they'll get the World Cup. I tell you what, we can clean up soccer when you clean up the NFL and boxing and everything else that's so corrupt in this country. And it's seen as like, yeah, America's going to get us the game. I mean, give me a break, folks. The city of Austin paid hundreds of millions of dollars to build the F1 track outside town and give Ecclestein or Steen, or it's a really hard name to pronounce, Ecclestone, Steiny, or whatever, however you say it, Ecclestone, so he could give his daughters each $400 million houses or whatever. And look, if it wasn't taxpayer money from all over the world where they give them the land, pay for everything, that he gives deals to the politicians locally to get some of the money back through corporate deals he gives them. I mean, this corruption is endemic. So it's the equivalent going after the Soccer Federation of going after Rubio for parking tickets. But don't worry, the NBA says no suggestion of FIFA-style corruption of basketball. Oh, you mean when you get cities to build you these billion-dollar stadiums? Multi-billion-dollar in the case of football? And then I got to pay for it, just like I got to pay for sex changes, abortions. Now they're talking about making people pay for nose jobs. I don't want to pay for your chopping your nose off. Meanwhile, I know so many people having their houses taken by the IRS because they've lost their jobs and can't pay, and people getting kicked off Social Security and can't get health care. And they go in and say, where's my free health care? And they laugh at them. Obamacare isn't free health care. Scum. How about a double or triple your prices? They got rid of the charity care now under Obamacare. They don't have to give you health care at charity hospitals anymore that run as profit centers. Most hospitals are charity hospitals. That's how it was always run. We had the best health care in the world until 50 years ago. Government corporations got involved. Insurance companies got involved. Now it's really bad. We got still some amazing health care sometimes, but the system itself is out of control. And then people think we're going to get reformed by a group of crooks like Boehner and Obozo. And again, I like to call him O-Vomit, O-whatever, but really, he's very successful. So I want to play John Bound's report on this because it is a major distraction. And then I'm going to get into, when is it a crime to withdraw money from your bank? And more. Here is that report.
We are here to announce the unsealing of charges and the arrest of individuals as part of our long-running investigation into bribery and corruption in the world of organized soccer.
It must have been Let's Pretend We Work for the American People Day over at the Department of Justice. Newly appointed United States Attorney General Loretta Lynch dropped the hammer on World Cup soccer executives, issuing warrants for their arrest regarding the accumulation of over $150 million received by employing methods of racketeering, money laundering, and wire fraud. The head of the snake of this notorious soccer empire, Sepp Blatter, will of course remain untouched. Bread and circus historically serves as a huge distraction while the real criminals mingle in smoke-filled rooms holding the puppet strings of law enforcement that knows full well how they arrived at their position and where the real line is drawn. And so it goes, while the world watches soccer executives scurrying out like rats, no arrests, no warrants, nothing is done to the instigators of a far greater recent scandal that dealt punishing blows to the economy. 6 banks have agreed to pay a combined $5.8 billion to the Justice Department and other regulators. 5 of them have pled guilty to criminal charges. Citicorp, JP Morgan, Barclays, and RPS are pleading guilty to charges tied to Forex manipulation, while UBS is pleading guilty to interest rate manipulation charges. They have each agreed to a 3-year corporate probation period. No scurrying executives, no impending jail time, just a laughable corporate probation period and fines. Who cares if executives of the most powerful banks colluded on rigging interest rates to make billions of dollars? The DOJ doesn't seem to mind that the Department of Defense spent $4 million on taxpayer-funded credit cards for personal charges, including $3.2 million of it at casinos, and $100,000 at strip clubs by 646 government cardholders. While the average American family is seeing their healthcare costs skyrocket, the government throws away billions per year on waste and fraud. Those very same officials spending our taxpayer dollars will be right on board once the cash trough is replaced by digital currency, and that is coming sooner than most people think. A new age of economic totalitarianism, as highlighted by economist Martin Armstrong, is being discussed with zeal in secret meetings in London. Armstrong writes, this idea of eliminating cash first floated as the normal trial balloon to see how the people would take it. Kenneth Rogoff of Harvard University and William Buter, the chief economist at Citigroup, first launched the concept. Their claims have been widely hailed, and their papers are now the foundation for the new age of economic totalitarianism that confronts us. Rogoff and Buter have laid the groundwork for the end of much of our freedom, and one day will be considered the new Marx with hindsight. Considerations of their arguments have shown how governments can seize all economic power and destroy cash in the process of eliminating all rights. Physical paper money provides the check against negative interest rates, for if they become too great, people will simply withdraw their funds and hoard cash. Furthermore, paper currency allows for bank runs. Eliminate paper currency and what you end up with is the elimination of the ability to demand to withdraw funds from a bank. Our Defense Department squanders billions of taxpayer dollars.
We wanted to know how much taxpayer money the government spends on these mysterious micro purchases. So we found out. Our review found about $20 billion in just about the course of a year. We asked all of these other major federal agencies based here in D.C. for their micro purchase shopping lists, and all refused.
The same cadre of criminals that crashed the economy in 2008 were merely slapped on the old wrist after being caught rigging interest rates. And world governments are colluding to imprison the population with a digital currency that will enslave anyone that doesn't adhere to the impending New World Order system run by a group of elite scum that would become far more powerful than anything we have ever imagined in our worst nightmares.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, as it is called, is an all-out assault on our national sovereignty. It would unconstitutionally transfer legislative powers from the U.S. Congress, our state legislatures, our city and county governments, to multinational corporations and unaccountable international bureaucrats at the World Trade Organization.
Americans are still off in la la land thinking that United States has the sovereignty. You know, the International Organization of Securities Commission regulates our market, and there's a Basel Commission on Banking and BIS, which Bank of International Settlements. These, the Federal Reserve is part of BIS. It regulates banking. You know, the International Criminal Court of Europe has jurisdiction over here in the United States. So the American people need to wake up that the sovereignty of the United States is gone.
Global government's not coming, it's here.
Exactly.
But twisting a few media moguls' arms to squeeze out bribes within an industry built on kicking a ball around a field is far more important? John Bound, Infowars.com.
Very powerful, true journalism report by John Bound of Infowars.com. Great job, John Bound. And that aired last night on the Nightly News. You're really missing hardcore information. The hour-long Nightly News, 7 o'clock Central every evening with our great team of reporters and researchers and all the folks that are behind the scenes here. I want to go through news as much as I can. I mentioned the war on cash. When is it a crime to withdraw money from your own bank account? I want to get into this Paul Watson article that's huge. TPP emails show CEO joked about making royalty payments to U.S. officials. Going on to say these are our rules, Bragg Chemical Company boss, on how they're basically writing the international law that you can't see. So we'll get to all that, but there's a Fox News story here that I could spend 10 hours on because I call this a Rosetta Stone article. and I talk about this maybe once a week, something I say is a Rosetta Stone. It's a decoder. You read this article, you understand everything, how they work, how they operate. Even Fox News reports, like, is it reasonable, is it not reasonable, that 11-year-old girls were taken to a lesbian/gay porn shop. Porno movies, sex toys, everything. And the school said it's okay because it's alternative. See, if they were teaching heterosexual sex to third graders, it'd be called pedophilia, and it is. But when you bring this whole gay thing in, it's all right. So we'll grab that news report and play it in the next segment. This is the sexualization of our children, and this is cults of basically pedophiles. From Dennis Hastert on down, that are coming after our children. And when heterosexuals do it, they get locked up. When homosexuals do it, they get called goddesses and worshipped. And this is what the takeover is. Star Tribune's also reporting, and we're not joking. I mean, full-on sex shop, folks. 11-year-old girls. Now, imagine in America. And by the way, I can't even say some of the stuff we know that WorldNet Daily reported on years ago. Stations would complain when I would read articles about what 10, 11, and 12-year-old boys and girls in Rhode Island and other states, or in one case, were taken to a college dorm and put in beds and then taught stuff I didn't know about till I was in college. It's pedophilia. That's not my view. That's what it is to take. I mean, if you go up in a park and try to show a Hustler magazine to an 11-year-old girl, folks, you're going to go to jail for 10 years, and you should. But you take them and you show them a bunch of women naked together and a bunch of men naked together, then it's trendy. It's the same thing. These people need to be indicted. And it's just par for the course. I see this all the time. The smitten kitten. By the way, any of these stores have got everything in them. So to claim, oh, it's progressive, it's okay. Again, that's the political correctness is an excuse for people to do whatever they want, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely, totally, and completely over the top. Over the top. You're an adult, do whatever you want, as long as you don't hurt somebody else. You keep your hands off kids. Briefly, InfoWarsLife.com has Survival Shield Nation Iodine X2 that you've heard people go crazy about, and some folks are so deficient in it. But if your thyroid is full of a bunch of stuff, I mean, get ready for some serious stuff to go on, and consult your physician. This is the real deal. Same thing with super male and super female vitality, all available. But X2 is selling out. It will probably sell out by Sunday. InfoWarsLife.com. The globalists think they're insulated from all their corruption that they're putting on us, but history shows they'll always end up getting run over by their own system. Ooh, don't they help themselves? Just like Obamacare, the insurance companies just last year had almost a 50% increase in profit. Was it 48? Just off U.S. Obamacare. Global companies worldwide, 7.5 billion people, insurance companies all over the world, 48% increase in profits globally off screwing over American taxpayers. A global tax on the USA of chumps. And I love our country. I think our country's been exceptional. I love our republic. But I am ashamed of our nation. And I get up here and I talk about how I'm ashamed of it and run it down so we can change it. It's like telling your kid if they're being a slob, you're acting like a slob, clean up your room. But I mean, it's gotten to the point where the gay and lesbian agenda, not of the average person that's gay or lesbian out there. I want to make that clear. But of the people driving it, is to take people's kids and sexualize them and have their way with them. I mean, girls 11 to 13 were taken on the field trip. I'm going to cover this more at the bottom of the next hour and get to Jakari's report as well. But it just shows how whacked out everything is. And it was a liberal, holistic school for K through 12 with emphasis on the democratic process, individualized instruction, academic freedom, self-motivation, cooperative learning, youth empowerment, and environmental stewardship, hardcore liberal. So you took them to a smut shop. God almighty. That just shows the unbelievable. I mean, I have an 11-year-old daughter. And I'm not a violent person, but if someone took my 11-year-old daughter to a porn shop, I don't care who it is, what color they were, if it was a school, an individual, anybody, I would call the police. But if I saw you, I would beat the living snot out of you. I mean, I couldn't help it. I would guaranteed start punching you in the eyes and the nose and stomping you. I mean, that's a normal response, too. I can't handle it anymore. I can't handle all you scum that think my kids belong to you. They don't. You got it? Get it through your head. Leave us alone. We're tired of it. Quit pushing us. Melissa Harris Perry on MSNBC saying our kids belong to you. No, they don't, you stinking witch. You criminal cartel member. Shut up, you stinking pile of crap. Excuse me. Man, this pisses me off. I hadn't seen that article, and they came in and gave it to me, and I went and read like 3 articles before I believed it. They're in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune discussing whether it's good or not. I mean, that's the thing. They're in the news like, well, it is progressive. Yeah, men having orgies together, it's okay. Women all together, it's okay because it's not heterosexual. What? I don't care what it is, you stinking pervs. Oh, I mean, it's just over the top. Third hour coming up. Stay with us. By the way, if you just joined us, this Gaia, or Earth Worship, that's what that name basically means, Mother Earth School, is progressive and teaches environmentalism, just the standard liberal totalitarian tribe. The reason I say that they're going to spin it and say it's okay because it's about being progressive, because the store is a, quote, progressive sex toy store for everyone. So my point is it's being spun that it's okay because it's for everyone. And you watch, that's how it'll be defended. Because I've seen this over and over again. They go, we're going to have, you know, the sex education on, you know, Billy having 2 daddies or whoever having 2 mommies, when you shouldn't be teaching sex anything to young children. They're not even thinking about that. It's not the place of schools that are riddled with predators. And I've explained this over and over again. There's a predatory hierarchy that's taken over the Catholic Church, that's taken over Congress, that's made major inroads, maybe not taken over, a lot of major institutions. I think you could argue taken over the Catholic Church to a great extent. And I remember them 15 years ago when that was all breaking, going, it's a conspiracy theory about the Catholic Church. None of that's going on. There's no cover-ups. No, there are cover-ups. And it's kind of this thing where you commit crimes so big, even people who aren't involved in it cover it up to protect the institution. It's too big to fail. That's what Jakari Jackson's report's about coming up with these big charities that everybody knows are stealing and not giving money where they're supposed to, but they're just institutions. So the mainstream media, every time there's a disaster, says United Way and Red Cross, that's where you're supposed to give your money. So it's the same story over and over again. I'm not saying the school itself are a bunch of pedophiles. I'm saying it's part of this culture that is mainlining sex to kids and spinning it as if it's progressive to teach them about it. It's not the school's place. You're not their parents. Parents call on school's chief to resign for smitten kitten field trip. Let's go ahead and play a clip from the news. Here it is.
wanted our children to grow up and remain children as long as possible.
But says he never imagined that would include a first-hand look at sex toys and risque material. After his 13 and 11-year-old daughters came home, they shared what they saw. Floyd immediately pulled them out of Gaia and says the school did not give him any notice about the field trip. In a letter posted to Gaia's website, the school board says it stands behind the field trip.
They're certainly not going back to that school.
Floyd says his daughters are still traumatized and is waiting for an apology.
I want justice.
See, he's just an extremist. I mean, it's no big deal to take little girls to a porn shop for a school field trip. I mean, come on. That'll take them to a field trip where they're doing surgeries, chopping arms and legs off for transabled folks. I mean, it is a Democrat school. It is trendy. It is liberal. Sound science. I mean, that's what this is all about. All right, I'm done talking about that. We got another guest coming on to get us some really key information. Stay with us. Coming up, TPP emails show CEO joked about making royalty payment to U.S. officials. That's up on Infowars.com. Professor Francis Anthony Boyle is a leading American expert in international law. He's responsible for drafting the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of '89, the American implementing legislation for the 72 Biological Weapons Convention. He served on the board of directors of Amnesty International and represented Bosnia and Herzegovina at the World Court. He serves as a legal advisor to Palestinian delegation of the Middle East peace negotiations from 91 to 93. 2007, he delivered the Bertrand Russell Peace Lectures. Professor Boyle teaches international law, University of Illinois, Champaign, and is author of a whole bunch of books dealing with genocide, dealing with international law, you name it. He holds a Doctor of Law, magna cum laude, as well as PhD in political science, both from Harvard University. His recent book is Destroying Libya and the World Order, the 3 decades U.S. campaign to terminate the Gaddafi revolution. I want to briefly talk about that because at the time he said it was to destabilize and basically destroy Libya and the rest of Africa for that matter. And then now they call it a great failure, that it is a failed state and a big Al-Qaeda ISIS hangout. But the reason I got him on today is he's traveled extensively in the Middle East, is also to get into ISIS and the West being behind it, and the defense intelligence document that went to Judicial Watch 2 weeks ago showing the West is running it. I mean, this is just huge information. Saudi Arabia being protected on 9/11, the 28 pages. That's in the London Telegraph today. This stuff's really starting to come out now, and just the whole political atmosphere. But first, he is an expert on anthrax and has contact with the experts, and I just wanted to know what he thought about this news that hadn't gotten a lot of attention, but it's been in the news. Pentagon, number of anthrax shipments accidentally shipped doubles. And now we learn it's all over the U.S., all over the world. Anthrax mistake grows as 51 labs may have received live spores from U.S. military. You know, they tried to blame 3 or 4 different patsies for the anthrax attacks in 2001. They said it wasn't weaponized, and of course it was. I mean, what's really going on here? Professor Francis Boyle, thank you for coming on, sir.
Well, thank you, Alex, for having me on. My best to your listening audience. Yes, the anthrax, this is extremely dangerous situation. All I can comment on is what I've seen so far in the public record. First, Dugway admitted that they were engaging in open-air testing of live anthrax there at the Dugway proving ground. They said it was for defensive purposes, but that's nonsense. If indeed they just wanted to test costumes or things, they have chambers to do that. The only reason they would be testing live anthrax in the open there is part of waging anthrax war. Indeed, there is a federal statute directly on point prohibiting the open-air testing of both biological and chemical weapons, going back to the earlier offensive warfare preparations at Dugway that killed all those sheep. Although there is a presidential waiver in there, but I don't know if there has been a presidential waiver either by President Bush Jr. or President Obama. Second, if you look at what happened in South Korea, that is extremely dangerous. It's already been reported that the anthrax there was aerosolized, which means it was weaponized. The only reason you aerosolize anthrax is to weaponize it. We know for a fact now, according to their own accounts, that at least 20 people there are taking Cipro or other antibiotics and getting the anthrax shots in combination. So it does appear there was a major incident there in South Korea at that U.S. air base involving live weaponized anthrax. Third, even in accordance with their own account, they sent in this special unit of the United States Air Force to clean up the mess and decontaminate it. This is a well-known unit in the U.S. Air Force that specializes in NBC warfare, and in particular, how to contain it, sanitize it, desanitize it, decontaminate it. These are the pros from Dover as far as the Pentagon is concerned. And when they have a very serious situation to contend with, they send in this particular unit.
Let me ask you a big picture.
They wear moon suits. Let me continue, Adam. Yeah. They wear moon suits. All right. When they go in somewhere, they are wearing moon suits, which again, to me, indicates that this is weaponized anthrax we are dealing with. And finally, let me relate this back to the anthrax attacks of 2001.
That was my question. How does this tie together?
That we've already discussed quite extensively on your program. My research and others have concluded that that too was super weapons grade anthrax manufactured by a combination of Fort Detrick, the CIA, Battelle, and Dugway. And as I said before on your program, I believe even before this happened that there is a stockpile of weapons-grade anthrax there at Dugway. And that very well could be what we're seeing here, too. I simply do not know if the other shipments to the now 51 labs, and we've got 30 people now on Cipro and or taking anthrax shots. I don't know. I can't say if that's weapon-grade anthrax either, like South Korea, but it very well could be, Alex.
Well, Professor, I'm not a biological weapons expert like you, but I've interviewed the experts many times. I've researched it. I mean, they don't just pull weaponized anthrax out of these vaults with these containment units where they have moon suits and pressurized seals and underground buildings, as you know, and then mail it around everywhere. So what is the point of doing this? And even mainstream media says, yeah, it looks like it's, super hardcore anthrax. Then we go back to the original anthrax situation in 2001 with the White House on Cipro. They had to admit that before it even happens. Like a day before it gets mailed out, they all go on it. So it really is a big mystery because they tried to blame 3 patsies, and the 4th patsy dies in custody. You don't like to speculate, but looking at all this weirdness, why is anthrax getting out again? Why is it breaking now that happened in 2008? What does all this mean? I mean, it's so crazy.
Well, Alex, you're certainly right. None of this goes out of Dugway unless it was sent out on purpose and intentionally. Indeed, General Odierno said this was no accident. So we have to ask why. And the reason it was done, they did it the last time, the Pentagon, CIA, Dugway, was to terrorize the American people after 9/11, 2001, to ram through the USA Patriot Act that was being held up by Senator Daschle and Senator Leahy and all of a sudden they were both hit with super weapons grade anthrax, and their opposition disappeared. And we note the so-called bogus U.S. Freedom Act just went through Congress this week.
After Hastert.
The other purpose of that October 2001 anthrax attack was to try, by the neocons, to get us to go to war against Iraq, claiming that somehow Iraq was behind it. And if you look at the international situation today, I don't believe the domestic situation can be disjoined from the international system. We're on the verge of warfare there with Ukraine, and the Pentagon and the neoconservatives are provoking it now as we speak. If you look at the Associated Press headlines today, the Pentagon, the Secretary of Defense, have threatened to use nuclear weapons against Russia.
It's incredible. I want to go to break and come back with that, Dr. Boyle. But first, just briefly, I get the motive. I understand what happened in 2001. Clearly, Pentagon-directed anthrax attacks to ramp to the Patriot Act. That's well known, and you helped pioneer exposing that. It's come out. What's the motive now, randomly mailing it all over the place and then getting caught? I mean, what's...
Well, first, on getting caught, I think there was a whistleblower at work here, just as there was a whistleblower at work on the those nuclear cruise missiles being sent out of Minot Air Force Base. So there's a whistleblower at work here that's gotten this message out. But if you recall, Alex, I'm sure you do, General Tommy Franks gave that interview publicly stating that in the event of another major terrorist attack on the United States along the lines of 9/11, the military was just going to shut the government down for good. So I think...
I forgot that quote. You just said it. Let's pull that up. Tommy Frank said in Cigar Aficionado, he said, we're going to just take over the government next time there's an attack, and that's the plan. And it's not the military taking over the coup. It's the coup through the military, and we're just another third world nation. Unbelievable. Dr. Boyle, stay there. See, he just reminded me of that. We're the ones that, like, a listener called us and said, have you seen Cigar Aficionado? If Dr. Boyle's got to go here in 6 minutes, he can. If he wants to spend another 10 minutes after that to expand on things, he's welcome to, because every time he comes on, he starts reminding me of things I'd forgotten about. Like the Cigar Aficionado that was basically Tommy Franks on the cover promoting martial law. Because the first few years after 9/11, they would go, well, of course we torture people. And, you know, of course we're going to do this and that. Of course the NSA spies on you. He said, quote, if a terrorist massive casualty producing event will occur somewhere in the Western world, it may be in the United States of America, that causes our population to question our own Constitution and to begin to militarize our country in order to avoid a repeat of another mass casualty producing event. And, of course, they would stage it to take over. Then enters Jade Helm, all the admissions of government gearing up to go after anybody that doesn't go along with the takeover. I've never seen such movement and preparation and starting wars with Russia, China, you name it. And, you know, Dr. Boyle is a world expert. I mean, he went to the top globalist PhD, groomed by them, wrote weapons treaties, was being vetted to go to and then he, you know, basically exposed it. I mean, as a guy that studied this a while, what do you think about all the preparations that are being made? I've never seen such ominous behavior.
Well, that's correct. Again, I'm afraid what we're seeing is the neoconservative agenda here being continued to pursued under Obama. We're coming close to warfare with Russia, sort of like a reverse Cuban Missile Crisis. And at that point, I think the American people are going to wake up and say, what's going on here? Why are we on the verge of Russia? And I suspect then we're going to see anthrax being used to scaremonger the American people into supporting a war against Russia. And China, too. As you know, we're supporting this overt militarist Abe, who it has these outlandish claims to these Chinese islands of Diaoyu. And both Clinton and Obama and Kerry have all said, well, we're prepared to go to war over these islands, even though we do not recognize Japanese sovereignty over these islands. So, anything could set off a war with Russia and or China. And again, read today's Associated Press report where Carter and the Pentagon are threatening the first use of nuclear weapons against Russia. They know that this is extremely destabilizing, and that's why they did it. You have massive war games now going on all over Eastern Europe and in the surrounding seas, the Baltic, the Black Sea, and in the air. So sure, anything could go wrong. Anything could set this off. It's it's sort of like the origins of the First World War, if you read it. And that
exactly
is probably where the anthrax comes in, that when finally the American people pay attention to what's going on, I'm afraid we might be hit by anthrax. Sure. I also want to say a word in support of your governor down there in Texas. I don't know him personally, but I think this is a wise precaution in light of the Jade 15 maneuvers, where to put the Texas National Guard on alert. Anywhere these U.S. military forces go and exercise, it's basically a zone of de facto martial law. So we really don't know what could happen here, except in the drafting of the Constitution at Philadelphia. Our founders firmly believed that the most dire threat to the existence of the Republic was a standing army, which is why they did not create one. Although they did create a standing Navy, they only gave Congress the power to create a standing army. And the Republic was to be defended by the state militias.
Sure, I mean, and in modern parlance, you just don't have troops quartered among you. You don't bring your military into the country, because that's what Caesar did, bringing the troops across the Rubicon. I mean, we know where this story goes. We're going to go to break.
And we also have Northern Command, which, as you know, was set up after 9/11.
Yes.
And they're treating the continental United States as well as Canada as a military command.
Yep.
So it's an extremely dangerous situation, not only war abroad with Russia, which appears more likely now than China, but even it could happen with China.
Totally insane. Sir, I want to ask you when we come back, we got a few more minutes with you, what that might look like with Russia. We'll go over that incredible AP report where they're going to say they're going to move the missiles into Europe. I mean, it is pure madness, and Obama's playing golf and Kerry's crashing his bicycle. Perfect music, The Danger Zone, crashing through the lies and disinformation. I should add, I'll be back this Sunday live, 4 to 6 p.m. Central, for the Sunday broadcast. And tonight, the nightly news, 7 o'clock Central. And Sunday, we launch our team to cover Bilderberg 2015 from the Alps in Austria. And basically, it's the TPP. It's the people that run the TPP, that run all these unelected, unaccountable boards, all these globalists that the power is being transferred to. It's worldwide fascism. They control the left. They control the right. We're in deep trouble. But the neocons, the Straussian neocons from Chicago Business School and Harvard, have written books. They're on record. PNAC, Pax Americana, but not a real American empire of ideas and freedom. You know, they're velvet empires. No, a militarized empire of tyranny. And they believe in the end justifies the means. Well, the truth is they're just evil. And they talk about nuclear war with Russia, survivable wars with China, national paramilitary stabilization forces in the U.S. And they wrote all this stuff in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Now they're doing it. And they tried it when Reagan was in. Not so much Reagan, people running it. The Rex 84, they had hearings in Congress about a plan for martial law during stage crises. It was in the Miami Herald and rounding people up. It all goes back to L.L. Lemnitzer and people that Kennedy and Eisenhower basically fired. This has been going on forever, wanting to stage terror attacks and take over. It's the oldest trick in the book. And now here's the headline: U.S. might deploy missiles in Europe to counter Russia. And then they go into talking about a first strike, which they say is U.S. policy. When they say U.S., this means the madmen running us. But I study Hitler attacking Russia or Napoleon or other megalomaniacs of history. They always end up believing they're invincible and going too far. And even if we could beat Russia 2 or 3 times over, you can't beat their counterstrike. I mean, we can't beat China. No one wins a nuclear war. This is insane. And you can see the real buildup. You can feel the energy. You can see the preparations. This is different. And I know Dr. Boyle's agreeing with us, Francis Boyle. Sir, for like 10 minutes or so, then I understand you have to go back to your students and your work.
To confirm what you were saying, which is this, I was an undergraduate at the University of Chicago and went through that same Straussian program with all the rest of them, including Wolfowitz, who was there. All of them were there. And Strauss had just retired, but I studied with his right-hand man, Cropsey. What we have to understand is that Strauss's mentor and guru and sponsor in Germany was Carl Schmitt, the diehard Nazi law professor who justified every hideous atrocity Hitler and the Nazis inflicted on everyone, including the Jews, which is why then Strauss broke with him at that point. But these neoconservatives are neo-Nazis. This is a neo-Nazi cabal here, right at the center of power in the United States government, in the Pentagon, in the White House, in the CIA, who are carrying out what you correctly called seems to be Nazi policies. And that is correct. We have a Nazi philosophy at work here. They've spent the past generation trying to infiltrate the academic world. I've been fighting these people ever since I was at the University of Chicago. And we see now law professors at elite law schools like the University of Chicago openly advocating Schmitt. We even now see professors on the so-called left citing Schmitt without mentioning he's a Nazi. It's very similar to the left's fascination with Heidegger, who, as you know, used to lecture in his Nazi uniform and fired his teacher and mentor, Jasper, because he was Jewish. So you are correct. We're dealing here with a Nazi philosophy and a Nazi cabal going back to Strauss and Schmitt.
Sure, and then just look at Bush's lawyers, John Yoo and Alberto Gonzalez, saying we can bury people alive, we can rip their toenails out, we can cut their genitals off. I mean, these people just think they're God, and now this craziness is continuing into Obama. It's just sheer insanity.
Right, and we see Nuland in charge of the provocations against Russia over Ukraine. This is a matter of public record. She orchestrated that coup d'etat, overthrew the democratically elected government of Yanukovych. She's a neocon. She used to work for Cheney.
The main group in the party that they turned power over to when they threw the elected group over are neo-Nazis who actually Heil Hitler.
That is correct. If you look at all the reports coming out of Ukraine, these paramilitary organizations are Nazi direct descendants of Nazi formations and movements during World War II. And now Obama put 300 U.S. military trainers in Ukraine. They're now allegedly to train the Ukrainian National Guard, not the Ukrainian army. Well, who is the Ukrainian National Guard? it is all these Nazi, neo-Nazi, paramilitary formations.
The ones carrying out atrocities. So what's the grand strategy, or is this political insanity? Because then you've got the open funding of Al-Qaeda and ISIS as if we don't know it, but then Defense Intelligence leaks that we're doing it. So we have leaks on the anthrax, leaks on Al-Qaeda. It sounds like a lot of good people in the government are really doing the right thing.
Well, I think so, that there are some what appears to be principled people in the Pentagon, maybe the CIA, I don't know, who are leaking this type of information to the American people. So at least we have some idea of what the plans are behind the scenes. But now today, the Associated Press, you have the Pentagon threatening Russia with a first strike of nuclear weapons. Well, that is deliberately destabilizing. How do you think the Russians are going to respond to this? They very well could go on alert again. I really don't know.
It's just totally insane. But meanwhile, Obama's playing golf. They're crashing bicycles. I mean, is there a method to the madness, or have they gone insane?
Well, again, it's the old debate about Hitler. Was Hitler insane or not? And I've read a lot of Hitler and the Langer biography and whatever. I just think what we've seen here for the past generation is a Nazi philosophy and Nazi operatives at work at the highest level of the United States government, and that's what's going on. If you want to call it insane, fine. I don't know where that gets us. But I think, if we study the history of the Nazis, and you pointed out their attack on Russia, the Russians will fight us to the death. I've been over to Stalingrad. They even invited me to honor the victims and the defenders of Stalingrad when I was over there, which I did in a ceremony. The Russians will fight us to death. There's no question about it. And if these Straussians, these neocons, believe that the Russians are going to back down, I think they're wrong.
Well, in closing, shifting gears over the Middle East, these Salafists, these Al-Qaeda type folks are the people Hitler funded again. And I'm not saying it's a Nazi conspiracy, but clearly they took the Nazi blueprint that they got at Nuremberg, and that's even the 68 Gun Control Act was actually that changed. That's on record. They just took not just the Straussians, but so many others. I mean, our troops dress like it. They wear the Kurzel helmet. We call it Homeland, Reichland. They are just basically doing the Fuhrer precept that the executive branch can do whatever it wants. It just sounds like a bunch of diseased lawyers came over and just taught a bunch of sick students this, and they bought into the power trip, sitting at their knee. And then you add some of the folks that fled Russia, the Trotskyites, who then also went from being communist to fascist, sitting there at the Nazi knee. It is just sick. And you got 36,000 top Nazis brought over because they would autocratically follow orders to run a bunch of agencies, not just NASA. It is like, I'm not saying it's a Nazi conspiracy, but it is like we got smallpox from the Nazis and now we have it. It's like we have that power-mad disease, that autocratic control freak disease. And that's why I call it a mental illness, because, if you love your kids, even if you're a maniac, you don't want to start a war with people with 10,000 nuclear weapons. It's just they just seem like they have death wishes or something, Dr. Boyle.
Well, the Nazis did too, when, what could I say, when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, he should have studied his history and he didn't. So there you go. And unfortunately, we're dealing with a group of people who believe that they are above history. That very famous statement, we're an empire and we make history and then you can catch up to it.
Karl Rove.
By the time you've caught up to it, Karl Rove down there in Texas, we'll make some more history again. So that is the mentality. I've seen it here in operation ever since I entered the University of Chicago in 1968 and then went to Harvard. As I said before in your program, I went through the exact same Harvard PhD program that produced both Kissinger and Brzezinski and Huntington before me. And that's the way they train you to think at Harvard, just like the Nazis, right?
Well, I just hope cooler minds prevail. And I'm not glorifying the military leadership, but compared to these people, it was Dempsey who went to Obama a couple years ago and said, no, we're not going to knock over Assad with the military because the troops won't go along with it. It seems to be the soldiers that have been in combat who know that this isn't fun. It seems to be chicken hawks who've never fought that think it's cute to play war. And just, reading what Hitler actually wrote near the end of World War II, he followed Napoleon. And I know you know this, Dr. Boyle, but visited his grave, all that. He thought he was above history. He knew why Napoleon failed, and he believed Operation Barbarossa he was in competition with Napoleon, and Hitler thought he was better than Napoleon, basically.
Right, and also you're right about Dempsey. It was Dempsey who told Obama they were not going to attack Syria. So at that point, then Obama and his CIA people, remember Obama's been a lifelong CIA asset, they then activated ISIS. And I said that right at the beginning. And that's where ISIS, ISIL, this Islamic State come from. When they couldn't do an outright military attack because of military opposition, they then activated ISIS. All these guys were in U.S. custody in Iraq, and we turned them to our favor, to our benefit. Now the Defense Intelligence Agency is admitting that. So you're perfectly correct. Yes.
Well, I talked to a lot of military folks, retired generals, recently retired colonels, lieutenant colonels, and other folks, and they're all completely freaked out. They said the military's falling apart. They won't even fix equipment. They won't even give them health care. It's all just a bunch of delusional, guys up there who think they're invincible because they have Harvard degrees. No offense to you. You know them. You've said that. On power trips, believing they control reality, like Karl Rove said. It just sounds like megalomania to me. Caligula all over again. Dr. Boyle, thank you so much. Where's the best place for people to find your latest book?
If you just Google my name, all my books will come up.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming on the broadcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. My best to your audience and everyone down there in Texas.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it is just totally insane. I mean, the time we're living in, if we survive this, we're going to look back and just go, what was wrong with us? Like Germans following Hitler or something. I mean, it is just, people could say, well, the Russians were bad. Whatever. It was stupid for Hitler to go attack them. Don't even choose sides. U.S., Hitler, Russia, whatever. It was dumb. 21 million Germans died. Almost all of them in Russia. I mean, why? So Hitler could outdo Napoleon? It's a power trip with these globalists. They think they're, man, I've been around some of these billionaires. I've been around some nice ones too, but some of them, and all they do is just walk around going, I don't like that guy. He didn't like it. I'll take him out. Blah, blah. Most of it's all a bunch of talk. And I'm just sick of being around men who sit around and talk about, well, I don't like this guy in business. I ought to just kill him. Just stuff like that. And then 9 times out of 10, these guys have never been in a vicious knife fight. They've never been in the military. They've never fought for their lives, in a gang fight. They have never lived it. People that have been in real stuff generally are wary of it because they understand it's real. Have you seen how soft Obama and Karl Rove are? And they just need to stop. Stop it. Stop it right now. Stop trying to take the whole world over. I mean, in Julius Caesar's day, at least he was taking over, backwards areas and giving them some civilization, and he was a tyrant. And there weren't nuclear weapons. Julius Caesar was like a cupcake compared to these people. I mean, he was a humanitarian compared to them. And I would judge him as a bad guy. But, I mean, you look at the people we've got now. Hitler was a complete psychopath. But he wasn't really a sociopath. He thought he was doing something good. You look at people we have running things now, it's just, in a way, they're worse than Hitler. I mean, Hitler had been in the military. Hitler had a Congressional Medal of Honor, Iron Cross First Class. I mean, only a few hundred people had that in World War I. I I mean, he was a war hero. That's why he thought he could win all these wars and do better than the generals. Today, it's the inverse. It's just a bunch of arrogant Harvard guys. It's like Corzine making 40-to-1 bets with other people's money. They're crazy. We're going to come back with Jakari Jackson's report and more. Briefly, we are going to sell out a survival shield, a Nascent iodine, ultra pure 999. It's super hardcore. The body, most people are deficient in iodine. This is very strong, though. Be careful with it. Consult your physician. And see what it does for you if you choose to check it out. InfoWarsLife.com. We are selling out of our current supply. We have enough to manufacture a smaller amount, and then we have to procure more of the crystals, which nobody else gets them drilled out of the ground at 7,000 to 12,000 feet. Everything else comes from kelp. Our original survival shield's tested to be the cleanest out there. We've still got it, and it's kelp-based. We got plenty of that at InfoWarsLife.com. That's what you'll be able to get after this sells out. I hope we get more soon. InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139. And another great benefit is you help fund the InfoWar, where you get hardcore, unfiltered, historical analysis and truth. And this is as close to the truth as you're going to get. I'm trying my best to be absolutely on target. Yeah, Joe Jennings just made a good point. Globalists say there's too many people and they can't re-educate everybody. A war would get rid of all us old holdouts. And then everybody can emerge out of their bunkers 20 years later to the new nostalgic utopia. And of course, there would have to be 10 women to every man to repopulate the earth, a breeding program, and the females would have to be selected for their appeal because of the duty of the men. The women would have to be of a sexually stimulating nature. And I am quoting Dr. Strangelove there. Every time I warn people about fluoride, the media goes, oh, yeah, Dr. Strangelove, General Ripper, you're crazy. Really, is that why Harvard admits, the great Harvard, that it's brain-damaging people and the feds are saying cut it back? Sane people that love their kids are going to take this world back. We don't want GMO. We don't want rat poison. We're done. Here's Jakari Jackson's report. It's really important. I'll be back this Sunday, Lord willing, 4 to 6 p.m. Central with the Sunday transmission, Nightly News Tonight, 7 o'clock Central. Here's Jakari Jackson.
Jakari Jackson here, going to talk to you guys today about some fraud. Now, we know that there's been a lot of natural disasters in places like Texas, Oklahoma, I'm sure other parts of the country as well. This is just a part of country that I'm in. And you have the tornadoes, you have the floods, and along with it, you have the charities, and you also have the fraudsters. And sometimes it's hard to figure out who is who, because there are plenty of people saying, hey, give me money and I'll donate it to the victims. And some of these people are on the up and up, but sometimes they're not. And it's not always the people you think. We have this article out of ProPublica, how the Red Cross raised $500 million for Haiti and built 6 homes. That's right, with $500 million in aid. And I understand you got to have travel and water and things such of that nature, but they built 6 permanent structure homes. Now, what did they do with that other money? Okay, well, they set up tents and they were teaching people how to wash hands, even though they didn't have efficient running water, things along that nature. So where'd all the money go? I don't have a definitive answer for that. I definitely encourage you guys to go and look at it for yourself. I try to print it out myself, but it is quite long. It is 17 pages printed out, so you guys can go look at it at your leisure, and you'll see all the various instances of management and mismanagement of the funds. But it's not just Haiti. As you guys recall, Hurricane Katrina, a lot of mismanagement there as well. And particularly, we have this article, New York Times, throwback, breathtaking waste and fraud in hurricane aid. And one of the examples in this article points to a woman who says that her children died during the hurricane or the flood that happened thereafter. Well, not only did her children not die, she did not have children to begin with, or at least not children that she claimed died in this incident. And let us not forget FEMA coming out and saying that, hey, during Hurricane Sandy, we're going to close because the weather is too bad. That's right, the agency that's supposed to come to your aid in time of a crisis is saying that, hey, it's too much snow, the streets are too slick, so we can't actually come and help you do anything. And I'm not just here to bash these companies, these organizations, these charities or whatever. I'm just trying to get you guys to understand that when it comes down to it, when it really hits the fan and there's flood waters or hurricane damage or whatever else, the only people you can really rely on are your neighbors. Because yeah, there may be good-hearted people all over the world, but they could easily be scammed if they're trying to get the money to you, trying to get the supplies to you. So when you have things that happen like such here in the city of Austin, you can go to a local food pantry. And like personally, I don't give people money, or at least not charities money. Like I'd rather go donate food or drop off clothes or whatever else. And I'll give, a homeless person money, but it's going directly to that person. It's not going to some committee. It's not going to pay somebody's travel expenses. They're not getting cents off the dollar. If I give a homeless person $2, they get $2. So that's it for right now. Be aware of the scams, and you can find more reports on the Alex Jones channel on YouTube.
That's a good report with all these crises going on, a lot of people giving. I mean, it's like the Clinton Foundation, more than half the money they siphon off and scam. But United Way and others have been caught giving money to gun control. So, I mean, it's even worse. We're going to do a little bit of overdrive to finish up here. Infowars.com/show to find that feed. I want to thank all of our affiliates and the crew. Great job, folks. We were talking about United Way during the break, and Joe Jennings popped in. How when he worked at a bank, they required him to give. And then you go to Walgreens or CVS or anywhere, and they'll start bullying you to give money to this or that, and most of the time it's a scam. Or you're giving money that goes to leftist organizations, or United Way is keeping their money with that bank. Joe, tell us the story, because I've heard about these companies that, quote, make you take automatic, a deposit, make you give to a charity. I mean, it's just sick. Tell us about it.
Well, basically, they said, hey, we're going to be doing this United Way funding thing, and we'd like you to donate. You need to tell us how much we're going to take out of your paycheck. And I said, well, I don't even know anything about United Way, and isn't that a choice? Well, no, you don't really have a choice. It's going to be taken out of your paycheck. So you need to let us know.
And of course, you did have a choice. It's like vaccines. They go, no, you will do it. Well, there's no law. You're going to do it. It's all bullying. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're correct. It was kind of looked down like, well, if you don't give, I don't know if we can still have you around if you want to participate with our the bank and how we do things.
What bank was it?
First Interstate Bank in California, which is no longer a bank anymore.
I don't want to just make this a leftist right thing, because the right has its own problems. We were just covering that with Bush and stuff earlier. But there's this new totalitarian left where they've got the moral high ground. So we'll take your kids to a sex shop if we want when they're 11, or we'll make you give to United Way. That is a whole leftist thing, because they're not leftists. They are these totalitarians. I mean, I know a lot of liberals that are the coolest, smartest people you can imagine. Now, I disagree with them on like abortion or, things like that. But overall, they're smart, informed, loving people. I just disagree with some of their views. But it's like that professor said, I'm scared of my young liberal students in that article yesterday. I mean, it's like the Red Guard. They're like, you will do it. Shut up. White people are inherently bad. And then it's all financed by big mega banks that just want us all at each other's throats. That's the point, is that they're just conduiting this entire deal into a huge, giant mess, while mega corporations write the laws that then get adopted in secret in things like the TPP. And I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to cover it now briefly. TPP email shows CEO joked about making royalty payments to U.S. officials. These are our rules, bragged chemical company boss. The emails released under Freedom of Information Act requests show how one chemical CEO was so pleased with the rules being set by the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal that he joked about making a royalty payment to the U.S. government officials before bragging, these rules are our rules, close quote. 400 pages of confidential emails between industry advisors and the USTR officials were obtained by the Intellectual Property Watch, the USTR Office of the United States and Trade Representative, and the U.S. government agency responsible for developing the United States trade policy. And, of course, it's all chaired with people from the companies who then shut down their competition. That's my biggest issue. And they don't, again, do this for America. They do it for globalist corporations. One of the emails was written to Jim DeLacy of Fanwood Chemicals, a company that provides technical marketing, direct sales, manufacturing, regulatory services to the chemical industry. Addressing to the USTR, Barbara Weisel, should be Weasel, the email states emphasis, "Hi, Barbara. John sent through a link with the P4 agreement. See, they get to see it, not us. I've taken a quick look at the rules of origin. Someone owns USTR a royalty payment or owes them. These are our rules. They will need some tweaking, but will likely not need major surgery. This is a very pleasant surprise. I will study more closely over the weekend." But see, the real setup of all these corporations is that once the body itself is set up and the corporations give their power to Sauron and the One Ring, they're now slaves. See, the ring race think they're going to get power. They become slaves when they put their rings on. You understand? The real power is that it's transferred to that body, and then they can change this stuff however they want and then make these guys give campaign contributions and jobs and kickbacks to even stay in the game in the future. Totalitarianism looks good up front, but man, it's like sticking your arm in a bear trap. That's it for this live transmission. We'll see you Sunday, 4 to 6, and tonight at 7. I want to talk about a perfect storm today. And the perfect storm I'm going to discuss is a really good perfect storm. I have prayed, literally, to be able to find a high-quality gun sponsor that is affordable and that is extremely well-made and effective that I can promote to my audience. About 6 months ago, we get contacted by Head Down Firearms, hdfirearms.com. Low cost compared to competitors, super high quality, super lightweight, super accurate, and the experts salivate over it and love it. Their entire line of 5.56, 308, and their accessories are simply amazing, and it's designed by battle-hardened vets that know what they wish they would have had. You need to go to hdfirearms.com today, or you can visit headdownproducts.com. That's headdownproducts.com.
On Tuesday, the residents of Flint, Michigan were rattled by explosions that resulted from a secretive Jade Helm 15 Urban Army exercise.
Big, huge explosion. I mean, it was loud.
Explosions you'd expect in a war zone echoed through Flint, and people's homes shook and those inside were caught off guard. It all went down at the shuttered Lowell Junior High on the east side. And we've learned the blasts are just an Army exercise.
When the city representative was asked why the locals weren't warned in advance, his response was as typical as it is ominous.
Well, obviously I can't speak for the Army on that, but we try to give people a heads up when we can. We can't go into too much detail. We don't want people just coming to these things and sightseeing. So we have to be careful with it, and we obviously have to respect the Army's wishes.
Meanwhile, the Michigan Air National Guard published a warning just hours before they began night-flying helicopter drills from the Selfridge Air National Guard base into the surrounding area of Mount Clemens, Michigan. Jade Helm 15 appears to be underway. According to U.S. Army Special Operations Command, urban drills conducted by all 4 branches of the military are to begin in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, Mississippi, Florida, and Louisiana from July 15th through September 15th, 2015. The state of Colorado and 2 Texas counties requested to be dropped off the list of potential mock war zones. Clearly, the Flint, Michigan, June 2nd, 2015 exercises are way ahead of schedule, and no warning was given?
There's older people. I mean, they probably give them a heart attack.
Some are saying Jade Helm stands for Joint Assistant for Deployment and Execution, Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. This can only mean the returning veterans at the top of the Department of Homeland Security's domestic terror list. Back in 2009, the FBI launched Operation Vigilant Eagle, a nationwide operation that targeted militia, sovereign citizen extremist groups, with their sights set on veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. The Wall Street Journal reported on the memo trail that led Months later, to the desk of then DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano. Janet Napolitano warned of a surge of domestic right-wing terror groups that would recruit returning veterans into their fold in order to carry out attacks similar to the Oklahoma City bombing.
Returning veterans are targets of right-wing extremist groups that are trying to recruit those to commit violent acts within the country. We want to do all we can to prevent that.
That very same year, U.S. active duty Army military police troops from Fort Rucker in Alabama violated posse comitatus by assisting in traffic control and securing a crime scene. These soldiers were reprimanded because the president and the governor didn't request their deployment. The Posse Comitatus Act prohibits the use of federal military personnel to execute the laws. Regardless, the feds interpret the language as it may apply to troops used in an advisory, support, disaster response, or other homeland defense role, as opposed to domestic law enforcement.
It was earth-shattering. It was quite an explosion.
They were very loud and shook my house.
The explosions came the same day the city said the U.S. Army would be conducting training in the area.
Here we are, 6 years later, and a summer of rage is heating up. The Obama administration's rhetoric and George Soros's dollars have done all they can to divide the nation. United we stand, divided we fall. Apparently, Northcom and Southcom see that as an order and not as a long-standing American value. John Bound, Infowars.com.
Well, folks, that is another excellent and extremely informative report by our own John Bound. I'm Alex Jones. We're live on this Friday worldwide broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. And when we return, we're going to break down the huge developments on the TPP front. It's in trouble. The EU is in trouble. A lot of good news as the global fascist empire takes more serious blows. They conquer you through economic conquest. So this is such a huge time to be alive because Bilderberg is a microcosm of this. The people that run Bilderberg, since the 1940s, they officially called it Bilderberg in 1954, when they met in Oosterbeek, Holland at the Bilderberg Hotel. They are the royalty. They are the robber barons of Europe and the United States. They are what you could call Hydra or Spectre. They are the bad guys. And their agenda can only operate in secret. If there's ever a debate about them, if there's ever a discussion about private corporate individuals and combines controlling government and controlling the issuance of currency and credit and controlling interest rates and controlling trade and borders and military and sovereignty and immigration, it's game over because even the stupidest 75 IQ person out there who might be able to tie their shoelaces, who might be able to find their butt at high noon with both hands, they can understand that the decisions are being made by people who aren't from this country or aren't from their country and who do not have their best interest at heart. That is the simple fact in all of this. And so when you see the trilateral plan of an Asian Union, American Union, EU Union, all those unions then merging together through trade deals, when they were set up as trade deals, once you have a debate about that, the whole thing starts falling apart. The whole thing becomes crystal clear as a dictatorial, centralized despotism, no matter what name or whatever word you give it. And so you can see June 5th, 2015 as a very dark time for the world where a lot of evil is coming out of the closet, emerging out of the waves and attacking like the Hydra, like the Leviathan. But at the same time, it's an incredibly positive time because the world is awakening and saying no. And the Tory party had to act like UKIP or they would have lost the election. UKIP gained a lot of seats. It's like a Ron Paul-style party. They're listeners of this show. They're guests of this show. They understand what's going on. Their fight is our fight. Our fight is their fight. We're all in the same boat. Sovereign nations being taken over by the globalists. We're all allied against this. And the Tories, as we said last year before the election and this year, began to act like UKIP and said, okay, we'll control the borders. Okay, we'll cut the taxes. Okay, we will get us out of the EU, or at least allow you to have a vote. The British and the rest of the people in the UK never had a chance to even vote on whether they want to be part of the EU. We don't get a chance to have a vote here, do we? We don't get to even see the TPP. The Congress just votes. The House is about to vote. The Senate voted to just give the president unlimited power to sign on to whatever he wants. I mean, that is so sensational, off the chart, over the top, ridiculous. Totally ridiculous that would be happening. 2 members of Boehner's leadership team openly refuse to admit if they've read Obama Trade. That's the TPP. So this is all a bunch of criminals in suits trying to act like what they're doing is normal and kosher and acceptable and not a problem. They're hiding it in plain view. We're blowing the whistle. And just as they said Bilderberg didn't exist 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 40, 30, 20, in the last 10 years, they've been forced to admit it exists. They've been forced to admit much of their agenda. And guess what? It's a global government, carbon tax, open border, technological technocracy that ends human liberty, ends freedom, ends sovereignty, and forces you to eat Monsanto GMO, basically. And taxes the internet and takes over free speech. I mean, it's sick. We're exposing the entire globalist hierarchy. I just spent, if you just tuned in, 12 minutes trying to break down something that's really simple. A private, global, fascist, eugenics-based world government that started the Nazi Party, started the Communist Party, is so evil, they've just committed purely to the most wicked darkness you can imagine. They're purists. These bloodthirsty purists, based out of the British Empire, allied with the United States and the robber barons, created a system of culture control about 160 years ago and deployed the plan and have pretty much taken the planet over. And they discovered DNA, and they invented computers and biometrics. Galton in the 1860s said, we're going to create machines to track everyone. We're going to discover how humans operate. We're going to master it. We're going to bring in a planetary government. And we're going to remove all of the dumb people from the earth and create a utopia. And the dominant empire of the world adopted that, the British Empire, the greatest empire this world's ever seen, with all its administrative manipulations and military power. And now that philosophy, that system, that logic has permeated into a private global banking cartel, because the British don't really run it today, they're just part of it, and has merged with the military-industrial complex and the technological elite that Eisenhower spoke of, and they're on a power trip. They're racing to get life extension. They are allowing all their new drugs and surgeries to be tested on the general public to perfect them for themselves. That is the practice of medicine, is it not? It's why it's called practice. And they are effectively anesthetizing and dumbing down the public to come in for the big win. Ragtag forces are aware of this around the world. The chemicals in the food and water, the biological weapon engineering in the food. We can see the diseases skyrocketing. We can see the IQs plunging. We can read the globalist owned battle plans and see they're carrying it out. And we're just here desperately trying to warn people. All being laughed at by the controlled right and controlled left. But as Christ said, forgive them, they don't know not what they do. The mid-level minions The good news is because of fighters like Nigel Farage and Lord Monckton 30 years ago that founded UKIP, they've put so much pressure on the UK that they are threatening to leave the EU if national sovereignty is not at least partially returned to the UK. That's a big first step. That's in the BBC and the Associated Press today. Germany's Merkel opened to EU treaty change for UK. EU weighs unprecedented reform as Britain threatens to leave. AP. And that ties into this headline. TPP begins to unravel as Obama launches final push for votes. Please just tell us what is in TPP. I'm going to read over some of this article. So humanity's putting up a fight. I mean, just 10 years ago, you'd tell people that there were, G7s and G20s, and you'd tell people that there were global elites meeting in secret, and the public had been taught there were no robber barons, there were no powerful men and women who wanted more power. I mean, that's like saying there is no sun that comes up in the morning. The public had been taught that government is pure goodness, and so are corporations, and nothing bad goes on. There's no secret groups, so just stick your head in the sand and go to sleep and watch your favorite TV show. We've now progressed to the point where 20 years ago, maybe 1 out of 50 people knew the Federal Reserve was private and European-owned. I mean, I remember hearing conservative talk show hosts 20 years ago say the Council on Foreign Relations didn't exist. They would get on air and say, that kook, Alex Jones, says a thing called the CFR runs everything. I didn't say it ran everything. Set up by British intelligence publicly in 1922 at Pratt House in New York City with the express goal of establishing British Empire rule over the continental United States through infiltration of government and working with U.S. robber barons. Did a pretty good job. But see, now people know the Council on Foreign Relations exists. The U.S. branch of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. So once we identify there's this shadow monster in the room that's doing the mischief, that it's the 100-pound gremlin, it's goodbye gremlin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this live, worldwide, original, teleprompter-free radio / television transmission. I am your host, Alex Jones, Infowars.com. And PrisonPlanet.com are our two flagship websites. We also have PrisonPlanet.tv as we fight the construction of the global prison planet. Let me just do this. I do this sometimes at the start of the show. I'm going to reset because I get so upset looking at the news headlines before the show. I tend to get mad. And I'm trying to psychologically get a handle on this. Again, there's a lot of good news. There's also a lot of bad news. We told you the day they indicted Dennis Hastert that it would be about basically raping his wrestlers. And, of course, now families have come out, and we know the names of the people and the payoffs. And exclusive, Dennis Hastert's sex abuse victim is named by family. I wonder what Lindsey Graham's going to do when his friend gets in trouble. Old Lindsey. I just think of Hastert. I just think of Lindsey. I don't know why. But you wonder why these guys are so sold out, why they go against 90%, 85% polls on things like TPP. It's because the Republican and Democratic parties go out and recruit people that are pedophiles because they know once they destroy them or need to destroy them, no one's going to listen to them saying other people are corrupt around them because of the scarlet letter P for child rapist or pedophile. So they go and they recruit them out of networks of pedophiles, and that's why the government's so scum-filled and why so many Homeland Security regional directors constantly get caught just every few weeks with little kids. There's one level even worse than them, though. There's the snuff films. In fact, the bassist of the Scorpions came out on TMZ a week ago, and Mark Dice had a report on it. We ought to play it. I forgot to tell you guys that, where he admitted in Germany, that's what movies like Hostel, I've told you, are based on real stuff. where people are killed at these elite parties from the worldwide rebellion against tyranny. I'm Alex Jones. You have found the tip of the spear for the fight for human liberty. Infowars.com. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. On this Friday, already the 5th day of whatever month it is in this insane asylum that we live in. Because it doesn't even matter what month or what year it is here inside the planetary world government, where the tyranny and the oppression and the ignorance just intensifies by the moment. It's television that's killing society. The world is absolutely filled with just non-productive, mindless chatter and behavior and people frittering away their lives, pretending that they're school teachers, pretending they're parents, pretending they're senators, pretending they're police officers, pretending they're artists, pretending they're intellectuals, pretending they're informed, pretending they've got their head screwed on straight, while meanwhile, organized anti-human systems are being developed and deployed against humanity. There is a lot of positive news, though, at the same time that we're going to be breaking down today on this worldwide broadcast. We have Lord Monckton joining us for 30 minutes at the start of the hour, one of the main fighters of the EU and the founder of UKIP, fastest growing party in England, UK-wide, and also in much of Europe. And he's an expert on EU tyranny and what's happening currently with the European Union. And that's tied into the rest of the trilateral global government program, the Asia Union and the American Union. EU weighs unprecedented reform as Britain threatens to leave. That's the Associated Press today. Germany's Merkel open to EU treaty changes for UK. BBC. We're going to be drilling down into what this means, but here's what's happened. The UK was brought in decades ago without a vote through stealth political actions into the unelected draconian European Union that at the time wasn't even announcing itself as a European Union and was actually a, quote, trade deal that was negotiated in secret and that England was then a signatory to. And we'll go over the years, when it happened, how it was implemented with Lord Monckton, who was there in the Thatcher government as her chief advisor, stopping it. And then as soon as she left office, they were able to sneak it through. So he was there when history was happening. Now, you may be saying this sounds like deja vu, because that's what the TPP is for the United States. And that's what NAFTA and GATT and all these things are these so-called trade agreements that are really global government agreements bringing us under private corporate globalist boards. And so this is really good news, because even if they ram the TPP through, which is in big trouble right now, it shows how decades later, as the public is informed of how they've lost their sovereignty and how roughly 83% of British and UK laws from Scotland to Ireland are made by the European Union itself. And then you notice just a few years ago, the EU actually officially just took Ireland over when it became a member. And then notice what happened to their economy. Suddenly they were signed on to all this debt that wasn't theirs.